Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Planning and Placemaking Committee of the 8th of July 2026. I'm Councillor Ian Massey. I'm the convener of the meeting. I'll now introduce you to the top table. On my far left is Councillor Grant Stewart, my vice convener, Miss Audrey Brown, Democratic Support Officer, and Mr Colin Elliott, Solicitor. And on my right is Mr Christian Smith, Development Management and Building Standards Service Manager, and Mr Sean Panton, Team Leader, Major Applications and Enforcement. And as this is a hybrid meeting today, members joining remotely are reminded that if you leave the meeting during consideration of an application, then you are unable to participate or vote on that item when you return to the meeting. This also means that if a member loses their internet connection during consideration of an item, they should not vote on that item. Please advise the clerk via the meeting chat that you are leaving the meeting, or if you have lost your connection and are therefore unable to vote on that item. And whilst we are operating as a hybrid meeting today, can I remind councillors and officers to use the chat function to attract my attention, which all members have access to. Q for questions, C for comment. I will now ask the clerk to confirm any apologies and the attendance of those in the chamber and online. Thank you.
Morning, members. We have apologies today from Councillor Illingworth and we have Councillor Angus Forbes substituting. We also have apologies from Bailey Williamson. We have one member online. I'll ask him to confirm he's present. Councillor James.
I'm here, Audrey. Thank you.
Thanks. And everyone else is present in the chambers.
Thank you. Members, I've received a request from the agent in respect of items 514 and 521 that these applications be taken at the beginning of the item 5 on the agenda. I am content to accommodate this request. Do members agree that both items should be brought forward and considered at the start of item 5? Thank you. Declarations of interest. Do any members have any declarations of interest? In the minutes of the meeting of the Planning and Placemaking Committee of the 10th of June 2026, do members agree the content of the minute? Thank you. Does committee agree to hear deputations on items 511, 512, 514, 521 and 522 on today's agenda? Thank you. And on behalf of the committee, I'd like to extend a warm welcome to deputations and members of the public watching today. Your request to speak has been granted. You'll be called to the lectern as we reach the relevant item on the agenda and be invited to make your deputation by the vice convener, followed by a period of time for questions from members. It is requested that the content of your deputation is kept relevant to the planning consideration in relation to the item of business being discussed. Please also ensure that when answering questions, your response remains relevant and direct to the question asked. Item 5, applications for determination. The major applications. This first application is for mineral extraction and processing, including alterations to vehicle access, erection of ancillary buildings, landscaping, reinstatement and associated works, phase 3, in part retrospect land southwest of Arns Farm, Ortarada, and to introduce the report is Mr. Panton. Thank you.
Thank you, convener, and good morning, councillors. So, as stated, the first major application we have on the agenda today is for the cessation of mineral extraction and accelerated restoration of Craig Rossi Quarry. We are recommending approval today as the revised proposals are considered to deliver a positive environmental outcome and an appropriate long-term restoration of the site. The proposals represent a material change from the previously approved scheme by bringing forward the cessation of quarrying activities and securing restoration within a significantly shorter timeframe. I'll now take members through a short presentation to detail the proposals further. Next slide, please. So here we can see the location of the site, which is just to the south of the A9 at Shinnefoot, Ortarada, with access obtained from the B8062. The site extends to approximately 21.77 hectares and for many years has operated as a small-scale sand and gravel quarry, comprising a compound area, processing plant, silt ponds, access tracks, and areas of previously worked or partially restored land. Next slide, please. We now have a proposed restoration plan. The submitted information confirms that restoration phases are to be brought forward, with the site now proposed to be fully restored by circa 2027. The updated phasing schedule shows that some areas previously identified for continued extraction are now to be restored without further working, while existing infrastructure, including the quarry compound, is to be removed as part of early closure works. The accompanying restoration master plan sets out the regrading of the site to a more natural landform, incorporating meadow grassland, woodland planting and wetland areas, and establishes a coherent framework for the long-term restoration and after use of the quarry. Next slide, please. We now move to a series of recent photographs. This first image shows part of the site which is still to be restored, with an area already partially restored in the distance. Next slide, please. This next image shows the site when looking back towards the B8062 and site access. Next slide, please. This penultimate photograph now looks at the existing sand and gravel quarry, all of which is now sought to be restored by circa 2027. Next slide, please. This final photograph again shows an area to be restored by circa 2027, this time looking back towards Glen Eagles. Next slide, please. Thank you, Convener. That now concludes my presentation, and I will leave members with the site restoration plan for details. Members should also note that the first local item on the agenda today also relates to this site. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Panton. And we do have deputations on this item, so I'll hand over to the Vice Convener for the deputations procedures. Thank you.
Thank you, Convener. Can I call on Mr. Richardson, agent on behalf of the applicant? Good morning, Mr. Richardson. You know the system well. You've got 5 minutes. Could you possibly turn the microphone up to your mouth so people online can hear? So in your own time.
Thank you, Councillor. Good morning, councillors. Thank you very much, convener, councillors and officers for accommodating my diary, which I and my daughter very much appreciate. I hope this has not been too inconvenient for you or indeed other attendees. I am the agent for the quarry restoration subject of this application and the proposed future use of part of the site subject to the next agenda item and known as the Dog Ranch. I was keen to provide you with a brief overview of the project and approach to delivery set within the parameters detailed in the committee paper. I am very conscious it was 6 years ago that the quarry restoration was presented to committee. Since then, Mordor Gun Dogs have come on board to develop a new investment plan that consists of 5 key elements. Firstly, to stop all quarry activities this month to enable the site-wide restoration. This is based on the design approved previously in front of you at the moment and will be delivered through the appointment of a competent technical team with professional oversight and a fully costed scheme. All work will be delivered within an operational and environmental management plan and traffic management system designed to protect the amenity of neighbours and wildlife. Secondly, to deliver the restoration in full, comprising a return of the 55-acre site to grassland meadowland planted with a native mix, 3 lochs and associated wetland habitats, and the planting of native woodland. Thirdly, to accelerate restoration from the previous completion date of 2033 to completion at the end of next year. Fourthly, to safeguard land for the Shennefoot Junction. And lastly, if approved, the restored landscape of 55 acres will enable the relocation of the Mordor Gundog enterprise from its current home at Pathhead of Condy to the site onto 5 acres within the middle of the quarry, pits 5, A, B and C, to deliver the dog ranch. This comprises training, kennels, veterinary practice, animal welfare recovery unit, arena space, and teaching alongside staff and student accommodation that we presented at the next agenda item. Combined, we believe these 2 projects could be transformative for the area, resolving a long-standing challenge of securing the restoration of the quarry and enabling the growth of a dynamic Perthshire enterprise. I'm very grateful to officers for the opportunity to talk through over the previous few years the restoration plan, and I'll be very happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Richardson. Members, if you have any questions, please populate the chat function. Councillor Braun.
Thanks, Vice Convener. Just a simple question. Obviously, there's been a lot of extraction from the ground. I'm not an expert on quarries, but my thoughts were, given the land is being restored back to nature, the public obviously will get in there and walk and whatever. Is there any danger to the public from landslip or or the ground? Since so much has been taken out of it, is it safe, or does work have to be done to strengthen the ground itself?
Thanks very much, Councillor. 100% safe. I mean, it's been a sand and gravel quarry for decades. It's very shallow seams. It just gets restored back with what's there. No, it's perfectly safe, and access remains, and ultimately it becomes grassland meadows and lochans, and there'll be appropriate safeguards in place in terms of, you know, public notification. But no, it's perfectly safe. Thank you.
Mr. Richardson, there appears to be no further questions. You're free to go back to the gallery. Convener, there's no further deputations. I'll hand back to yourself.
Thank you. Can I ask members if they've got any questions for officers? No questions for officers? Can I ask for a motion? Councillor Allen, you're straight in there.
Thank you, Convener. I'd just like to go with the motion and the approval recommended by officers. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Braun, you wish to second?
Yeah, happy to second.
You. Can I ask if there's any amendment? Amendment. Can I ask if members have any comment on the report? No comment on the report. Therefore, planning permission is therefore granted. Thank you. We move swiftly on. This is a local application, and this is for change of use of quarry to gun dog training centre, erection of kennels, veterinary practice, reception building, indoor arena, maintenance building, staff and student accommodation, installation of PV and ASHP and associated works, lands southwest of Arns Farm of Tarada, and to introduce the report is Mr. Panton.
Thank you, Convener. So this next application relates to the quarry site which we have just previously considered. The proposal is to make use of parts of the Craigrossie quarry by the applicant Mordor Gun Dogs as the dog ranch. Mordor Gun Dogs has a contract in place to purchase the entire Craigrossie quarry from the current owners, subject to receipt of planning permission today. I'll now take members through a short presentation to detail the proposals further. Next slide, please. So here we can see the location of the site. The application site extends to approximately 1.9 hectares and sits within the wider quarry site. Next slide, please. We now have the proposed site plan. The layout comprises a series of distinct building groups and arranged to reflect both operational requirements and a rural spatial pattern. Access is taken from the existing junction onto the B8062, leading into a tree-lined avenue to a cluster of buildings accommodating staff housing and student accommodation, overlooking the access and acting as a gateway to the wider development. Next slide, please. We now have the elevations and floor plans for the proposed luxury kennel building. As you can see, this building accommodates 12 spacious pens with their own doors. Next slide, please. We now move on to the proposed arena building, which would be the largest building on the site. Next slide, please. This plan now shows a 3-bedroom staff accommodation bungalow. Next slide, please. We now have the proposed elevations and floor plans for the vet building. Next slide, please. And now we have the student accommodation building hosting 4 twin bedrooms. Next slide, please. So turning to images of the site now, here we can see some of the existing quarry operations which will be removed to accommodate the proposals. Next image, please. This next photograph again shows some of the existing operations. The proposals are considered to be a significant improvement from this. Next slide, please. This final photograph shows the existing sand and gravel quarry again, as detailed in the last application. Next slide, please. Thank you, Convener. That now concludes my presentation. I will leave members with the proposed site plan for reference.
Thank you, Mr. Pant. And again, we have deputations on this item, so I'll now hand over to the Vice Convener for the deputation procedure.
Thank you, Convener. Can I call on Mr. Richardson, agent, and Mr. Thornburn, applicant? Gentlemen, you've got 10 minutes for your deputation. However you work, it's up to yourselves. Whenever you're ready to go, I'll start the clock.
Thank you, Councillor. Vice Convener. Thank you, Convener and Committee, for the opportunity to outline the project. I'm the agent for the project, and with me is the applicant, Charlie Thorburn of Mauder Gun Dogs. We were keen to very briefly outline the project, the ambition, approach to delivery, and why the proposed investment to restore and to relocate to Craig Rossi Quarry is so important for the growth of the business. If approved, we believe the project will make a very positive contribution to Perthshire's rural economy, support local businesses, and unlock the restoration of Craig Rossi Quarry. Charlie, over to you.
Thank you. My name's Charlie Thorburn. I am from a long family of highly decorated Scottish soldiers, and I chose to train dogs instead. So in 2005, having trained a few dogs for people, I managed to buy a derelict farm buildings on the Path of Condy, which your predecessors kindly gave me permission to turn into a house and kennels. We've 20 years later, we've outgrown our site. It's our home, my family home, and we have 13 staff. We have dogs go to 37 countries. We do government contracts for the likes of Indonesia, training drug detection dogs. So it's quite a diverse business, and we've run out of space. So moving to Craig Rossi is a huge opportunity potentially for us to grow what we currently do and also diversify into other dog-related businesses that we've had a lot of experience in. I've been the best customer of my vets for 20 years, so they're going to miss me, hopefully. But having all of that in-house, on-site, means that we can give second-to-none care for dogs of all stages, training from all over the world. I believe it's going to hugely help the local area in terms of there isn't a proper vet in Octorada or the surrounding area. Kennels, our training, etc., will provide lots of opportunity for mainly young people wanting to get into a career in dogs, which I've very luckily been able to do my entire life. As I always say, I've never really had a proper job. I just mess around with dogs for a living. It's the first of its kind, certainly in Europe, and I travel to America a lot with dogs, and I haven't even found anything over there. So I'm hoping that Perthshire can be sort of the start of a new concept. And yeah, that's, hopefully you guys all agree, and hopefully you'll let me crack on. Thank you very much.
Just 1 minute. Thank you, Charlie, and thank you, Mina. Set within the planning policy context, the project is underpinned by the case for rural diversification, local job creation, and skills development. The project has been informed by technical assessments covering key land uses, notably noise, drainage, and traffic. The dog ranch would operate within very tight environmental and infrastructure parameters to ensure the amenity of neighbours is safeguarded. The siting and the design will be progressed based on the rural heritage of the area, using natural materials with very high levels of environmental performance, from air source heat pumps to solar panels to extremely high insulation. Furthermore, the project will enable the restoration of Craig Rossi Quarry, as thank you approved at the last committee agenda item, to be secured while safeguarding land for the Shinerfoot Junction. Combined, we believe these two projects would be transformative for the area, resolving the long-standing challenge of the quarry restoration and enabling Charlie to expand his business. I should say there's another 15 full-time jobs that are created by this, and we have a student program based around animal training and veterinary that would be accommodated on site. The houses would be secured by a Section 75 agreement, so they link solely to the business. Thank you, and we'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, gentlemen. There's questions in already, and we'll start with Councillor Allen.
Thank you, Vice Convener, and thank you for your deputation. There's been a representation with regards to the planning application, and it basically centralises on the impact on residential amenity and noise control. So my question really is, at its peak, how many dogs do you think you're going to be dealing with, and how will that impact on the local environment?
So I think the key thing is that this isn't lots of dogs running around a field barking. We're the sort of the best of what we do, I think. So these dogs are being trained. So much as on a day there might be 10 dogs in a field having a training lesson together, they're not there barking. They're not running around chaotically. They are sort of in training and under control. The boarding kennel side of the business, so the dogs that will be staying on site, is obviously subject to the getting our license approved once we've built the kennels. But we expect them to license us for I think 48 dogs for the boarding kennel and about 20 dogs for the luxury dog hotel. So that's the kind of the numbers. Obviously, there will be dogs coming and going to the vets as there would be at any other vet practice, or anywhere. There'll be dogs coming and going. There'll be dogs coming for lessons as well, but it won't be sort of a giant dog park. That's not what we're creating. We're creating a training facility, and I currently live about as far away as that clock is from the current boarding kennels that we have on our farm, and if they were all barking all the time, then I wouldn't get any sleep. So it's not a sort of people imagine 60 odd dogs with lots of noise. It's just simply isn't like that. And also I've been designing these kind of buildings in my head for a long time regarding how to best look after the dogs, but also how to insulate them and give them the right fresh air, etc., and exercise in a controlled kind of manageable way. So it's been sort of hugely thought out to make sure that it doesn't have any impact on the area. And that's also why we're near the A9, and we've got a big site with sort of not a huge amount going on around us, just to sort of mitigate that as well. There's a big bank of trees on two sides. On the side that there isn't trees is the railway, and then the other side is the farm. But my current place that I live, in the time that I've been there, I've planted about 10,000 trees and about 4,000 meters of hedging. So I'm big into kind of planting and trees and woodlands, and part of our plan is to sort of encompass the area with even more woodland, just to make sure that 100% make sure that it's not going to have any impact on anyone else.
Councillor James.
Thanks, Vice Convener, and thanks for the presentation. Absolutely brilliant. You've kind of answered half of the question I was going to ask, and maybe the other bit, but I was going to ask if the boarding kennels were open for general use, and I was going to ask the same of the veterinary building. Will that be open to the general public, or is that exclusive use for the dog farm? Thank you.
Yes, both the boarding kennels and the vet practice will be open for the general public. The concept came about that I go to the vet quite a lot because I have a lot of dogs, but we want to provide a service to the wider kind of community and something that's needed in the area. So very much both are going to be open to the public. Yes.
Bailey McLaren.
Thank you. Great. It's good to hear about a business like this, a rural business, and the approach, your vision here. I'm presuming the dogs that you're training are actually have a financial value, and probably quite a high financial value. And given all the stories we hear about dogs being kidnapped, stolen, I would like to understand better your security here, because it's a very open site. It's close to a main road network. What will you be? How will you be approaching your security? There's no fencing particularly here, so how are you going to deal with that?
So one of the main reasons that we want to put some staff accommodation on as part of this site, that Mark talked about in the section 75, the staff accommodation, is so that we have people on site all the time. So there will be someone on site all the time and whoever's on duty, as it were, will have the cameras and the sort of the iPad with the cameras that I currently have on my phone permanently. I'm hoping to offload that onto some others for some help. The buildings, all the dogs, they're not traditional kennels where you might walk past and see the dogs in an outside run. They are all within a barn So they're within a barn, and the way we've designed them is so that during the day, the roller shutter doors come up, the dogs get fresh air and daylight, and they get out for their exercise, and at night, everything gets shut up and they're secure. So a combination of the staff on site, security cameras, and substantially well-built sort of steel frame buildings, all locked, etc., will hopefully prevent that. Thank you.
Councillor Forbes.
Thanks, Vice Convener. Interestingly, Billy McLaren asked a question I was going to ask, but I had another one as well, and maybe slightly linked to that. I was interested that you train dogs for government. I think you said drug detection dogs. I assume, therefore, if you're training a dog to detect drugs, you would have to keep drugs on site to train them, and therefore, will there be illegal substances stored on site, and do you require a license for that?
We would require a license for it, but we are not going to be requiring a license or asking for one. What we do is we take the dog, we breed the dogs. So part of the reason that our main we've done things for the British Special Forces and others, but our main sort of customer, as it were, that I'm talking about is the Indonesian government, who basically stop the drugs coming from sort of Thailand, etc., down to Australia. So it's funded by Indonesia and Australia. The reason they come to us is for the dog genetics and so we take the dog's training to a level, and then we send the dogs over to Indonesia, and they finish off the training themselves with their own drugs. So no, I'm not. We're not going to be having drugs or explosives or anything on the site.
Councillor Brown.
Thanks, Vice Convener. Actually, Councillor Forbes has touched on the question I was going to ask anyway, but it was just to clarify how the business works. I mean, presumably, as it starts, do you own the dogs themselves and then train them and then sell them on? That's the first part. And the other part, which Councillor Forbes touched on, is this idea that you're not just training gun dogs, traditional gun dogs for going fetching game that's shot. Is this a field you intend to expand into, so build the business up more so? Training dogs for other purposes, such as special forces or the police around the world. I know you mentioned Indonesia, but is this something you're looking to increase your business into that field?
Sorry, can I interrupt? We don't want to be going down discussions about business models, but I presume the question is really about expansion of the land use rather than about, yeah, thank you.
So we essentially don't want to grow our business too much. We like what we do in terms of size. It's a manageable personal business, but we want to improve our standards by having our own vet on site. It means when the dogs leave, they will have higher levels of care and checks before they go, etc., which will improve the sort of the visuals, as it were, from someone like the Indonesian government coming over and spending quite a lot of money to buy dogs. We're just creating something that basically making it better and better and setting the standard and being the standard rather than following a standard.
Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, Vice Convener, and thanks, gentlemen, for your presentation. This, honestly, is a business I wasn't even aware of, that it was a thing, and it's really good, as Councillor McLaren pointed out. It's good employment in the community and in the rural area. My question is quite specific. I noticed in the application there was comments regarding, the red lines and where the dogs would be like to train out of it. And number 63, it said occasionally, sorry, I'd have it quoted here. You would do some training outside the red lines on a limited. I'll read the whole thing. Comprising grasslands, lochlands, and woodlands will be utilised on a limited ancillary basis for dog exercise and training activities. That sounds fine to me. Could you just describe what that kind of means in practice? Thanks.
Yeah, so kind of going back to one of my earlier points, it's not. We will be using the woodlands and the paddocks for going out with the dogs to train them. Generally, most of the training we do is sort of one-to-one. Either it's me, one of my trainers, or me with a dog, or one of my trainers, me with a client with a dog. it's not sort of lots of dogs out training at once. The lots of dogs out for exercise will be done within the red zone, if that's the right way to put it.
Sorry, Charlie. Go
It's
for it.
your business, but I mean, this is the sort of the planning piece, which is that, you know, there is no change of use of the wider quarry. That gets restored and the activity itself stays within a very disciplined approach towards dog training within the red line. And that's partly to do with the noise issue and making sure that we keep things contained. Thank you.
Councillor Allen.
Thank you again. Nice easy one for you. As part of your deputation, you suggested there was a boarding kennel and a luxury kennel. Can you just tell me what the difference is between the two and why?
So there's a boarding kennel and a dog hotel rather than a luxury kennel. The word kennel is keeping well away from it. So basically, our boarding kennels will be built to be better than any other boarding kennels, but they will still essentially be, you know, a premier in, you know, clean, tidy, does the job, but nothing too fancy. Just, you know, a good place, you know, your dog's well looked after. The dog hotel is more a sort of home from home boarding experience for the dogs, and essentially this is aimed at sort of older dogs who've maybe come to our boarding kennels, and you know, they're a little bit like, I don't plan on sleeping in a camper van when I'm in my 80s, and also maybe the sort of the more sort of pampered pooch end of the market of people wanting to make sure their dogs are super well looked after while they're away on holiday. So we're just trying to kind of cater a little bit to everybody's needs and everybody's budget.
Councillor Braun.
Thanks again. I just wanted to ask, come back to noise, and you were talking about the dogs at night. They're obviously in kennels, and you mentioned you lived close by to your existing kennels. I just wonder how noisy are they? I mean, the dog. I mean, we've got two dogs, and as soon as they see a tin of food, they're off and barking. So, I mean, how do you control that noise when they're in a kennel? They're more like a pack when they're in a kennel. I can understand you're saying when you're training them backwards and forwards, they're actually not barking because they're training to retrieve birds, game, whatever. But when they're in the kennel at night, how do you try and subdue them, I suppose is the question.
Well, firstly, I'd like to offer you to come up to our current situation with your dogs for a lesson, which we charge for by the hour. Essentially, a well-trained dog who gets enough exercise, enough stimulation during the day, a little bit. I'm not an expert, but I have a couple of them. A little bit about like young children. I have two young boys who are pretty feral during the day, but their head hits the pillow at 8 o'clock at night, and they're done till 7 o'clock in the morning. The way we look after our dogs, it's essentially the same. So it's about managing them, and then during the day, because there's a good number of staff around all the time, we're in and out of the kennels 14 hours a day, 12 hours a day, kind of, looking after them. So it's making sure that, they understand that, when they're inside, they go to their bed and they go out for a run, etc. And just because if dogs are allowed to manifest a sort of into a sort of heightened state of excitement, then that's where you get problems, whether it's barking or something more serious. So it's just constantly just keeping calm, like a teacher in a school. You think of 1,000 children in a high school, it's not noisy all the time. It might be noisy when the bell goes for about 5 minutes, but then it's calm again, or calmer again.
Convener Massey.
Thank you, Vice Convener, and thank you for your presentation. You said you're running your business elsewhere at the moment. What do you plan to do with that business? Are you going to continue to run that business, both the businesses, or are you closing that one down?
So the idea is to transfer what we do at home down to once everything's built, once we've got the sort of facilities for the dogs, to move them down there so that basically my home can become my home to keep my wife happy.
Councillor Waters.
Thank you, Vice Convener, and thank you very much for your presentation. Just a very quick question. Your current base up at Pathiconde, and you did mention that you have to go for a license for the dogs as well. Has there been any issues raised with neighbours or any other things to do with your license raised over your time in your current premises? Thanks.
Short answer is no. In fact, we had a new neighbour who moved in 2 years ago, and he came to see us 3 weeks ago, and he said, I had no idea. He said, I thought you had a few dogs.
Gentlemen, there's no further questions. You're free to go. Convener, there's no further deputations on this application, so I'll hand back to yourself.
Thank you. Can I ask members if they have any questions for officers? Councillor Cuthbert.
Thank you, Convener. I just wondered why this was coming to committee, because it's a local application. I don't see any objections, so I just wondered why it was here.
That's a fair question. So ordinarily it wouldn't come. It's just because it was associated with the last application, which was a major, and it was cleaner to have them both determined together.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Harvey. Oh,
Just withdraw. Sorry, same
okay,
question.
thank you. Can I ask for a motion? Bailey McLaren, we'll take your motion.
Thank you, Convener. Thank you. Yes, I would happily forward the motion to proceed as per the recommendation set out in the paper by our officers. This application represents a strong rural business who is the business that is growing, and it also consequently is dealing with the quarry site, where there's a win-win here for us, but this is local employment, local visual restoration, and it's something that is a really positive application that we're determining here today. So I'm delighted to be able to put this forward for approval.
Thank you. Councillor Allen, do you wish to second?
Why not? I welcome the proposal, and indeed I look forward to the outcome. I've got absolutely no hesitation in recommending the approval of this plan, as was clearly obvious. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have an amendment? No amendments. Therefore, can I ask committee to have any comment on the report? Councillor Forbes.
Thanks, Convener. I think this is a really interesting business, and it's great to see a business that's doing so well internationally, based in Perth and Kinross, and willing to invest some money into expanding. I think it's something that as a council we should be supporting more of. Delighted to hear also there won't be any illegal substances stored on site.
Thank you. Any further comment? No further comment. Therefore, planning permission is therefore granted. Thank you. With the section 75. Okay, so we now move on to the next one, which is a major application, and it's for the formation of a 39 megawatt solar farm comprising ground-mounted solar PV array, battery energy storage system, a substation, inverters, transformers, welfare containers, fencing, CCTV cameras, vehicle access and associated works at land 890 metres east of the Bayer Balviard Farm, Strathmiglo. And to introduce the report is Mr. Panton.
Thank you, Convener. So as stated, the next major application on the agenda today is for a 39 megawatt solar farm and battery energy storage facility with associated development at Strathmiglo. Members should note that only one neutral comment was received with no public objections. The proposal is therefore only before the committee today, as it constitutes a major development. I will now take members through a short presentation to detail the proposals further. So on the screen we can see the location of the site. The building grouping you can see at the top of the screen is the bin group, and the access road you can see connects to the A912 road network. The site is approximately 4 kilometres northwest of Strathmiglo and 5 kilometres northeast of Glenfarg. The site also forms part of the Oakle Hills local landscape area. Next slide, please. We now have a proposed site plan where you can see the general arrangement proposed. The site is currently in agricultural use for rough grazing and the growing of arable crops. The site is identified as ranging from class 4.1 in the east to 5.1 in the west, meaning that it does not constitute prime agricultural land. Next slide, please. We now have a proposed elevation plan for the solar panels. As you can see, the panels are approximately 2.67 metres at maximum height and are angled to obtain optimum sunlight. Next slide, please. We now have the proposed elevations for the battery storage units. As you can see, they appear like large storage containers. 48 of these units are proposed, installed in rows of 6. Each unit measures approximately 8.3 metres in length, 3.1 metres in width, and 2.6 metres in height. Next slide, please. We now move on to a series of recent photographs taken by the case officer. Here you can see the relationship of the site to the bin group, which is the building group in the distance where the wind turbine is located. Next image, please. This next photograph again shows some of the site with bin beyond. Next image, please. Here you can see the topography of the site more clearly. For the site as a whole, the elevation varies from 245 metres above ordnance datum to 205 metres in the southwestern section of the site. Next image, please. In this penultimate image, we again see the site under question. You can see here the current use of the site for crop growing. Next image, please. This final photograph shows another part of the site, this time used for grazing. You can see here that the site is relatively well contained and is not highly visible. Next slide, please. Thank you, Convener. That now concludes my presentation. I will leave members with the proposed site plan for reference. Members should also note the circulated update to the report, which updates some paragraph wording and conditions and also removes some duplicate informatives that were added to the report in error. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Panton. Again, we have deputations on this item, so I'll now hand over to the Vice Convener for the deputation procedures. Thank you.
Thank you, Convener. Can I call Mr. Lindsay, applicant? Good morning, Mr. Lindsay. Sure you're aware of the procedure. Whenever you're ready to start, I'll start the clock.
Thank you very much indeed, councillors. And first of all, I'd like to thank very much the officers for a very comprehensive report. BLC Energy is a local Perthshire company for taking forward this project. We're based just down the A9 at Aberystwyth. And yeah, is that better? Can you hear me now? Yeah. And we are partnering and backed by Octopus Energy through one of their funds, Orit. And it's fitting for us that this is our first project up for determination, and it's here in Perthshire. So I'm very grateful of that. So onto the project itself, as you just heard, there are no objections from any of the statutory agencies in this project, and we believe that it meets all national and local planning policies. The Community Council has been actively engaged throughout this project. Glenfarg Community Council, we've met them on quite a number of occasions, and they are supportive of the application. And we have had a lot of dialogue with the local community. We've held 2 sets of public exhibitions that were very well attended. And again, as you just heard, I'm very proud that there's no objections at all from the public on the planning portal. And actually, the most interesting and enjoyable part of the consultation period that I experienced was the opportunity to go and talk to the pupils at the Angas Primary School and talk to them about renewable energy and about the project up at Bin Farm. And it was a real joy to see their enthusiasm for this project and this technology. And let's face it, this is why we're doing these projects. It's for that generation, not for us really here in the room today. Back onto the project itself, as you've just heard, it's not on prime agricultural land, and we've designed it to keep away from the very few neighbouring households there are. So the battery infrastructure is 500 metres away, and the nearest panels are actually 230 metres away. So we've kept that very distance from the couple of houses nearby. We don't expect any wider environmental impacts, and actually we do expect a significant improvement in biodiversity across the site if it's built. And that will be achieved through planting almost 8,000 new trees and over 2.3 kilometres new hedgerows. And that is there primarily for screening, but also to act as wildlife corridors connecting the woodlands around the site. The grid route is a buried cable, underground cable, that will go up and over through Bin Farm and down to Abernethy. And again, we don't expect any environmental impacts from that grid route as well. The site itself would require only 10% of the land on Bin Farm, which is primarily used for livestock grazing at the moment, and that will continue. So there won't be any major change in land use. Therefore, it's not a threat to loss of agricultural land and not a threat to food security. For reference, and I know it's a question that has been asked previously of this committee, if all the projects, all the solar projects in Perth and Kinross that are operational, consented, in construction, and in the wider planning system, if they all got built, that would result in a loss of 0.8% of available agricultural land here in Perthshire, less than 1%. So when people talk about we're losing all our agricultural land and massive food security, it simply is not the case for this. But these projects are incredibly important for farm diversification. Farmers, sadly now, have to look at other areas of revenue generation to keep their farms viable. Recent surveys said that over 72% of farmers across the UK are trying to diversify. And the really worrying part of that report, produced by Farmers Weekly and the McCain Food Group a while ago, said that 40%, 2 out of every 5 farmers, don't believe that they'll have a viable business 10 years and they'll be out of farming. That, ladies and gentlemen, is a risk to food security, in my view anyway. Going back to the project, this project is part of the Bin Eco Park initiative. If it is built, the power will be available to local businesses to try and encourage new, clean, green technology business to relocate to Bin and that part. And therefore, it is part of the wider Clean Growth Access Perth and Kinross initiative launched just a few weeks ago at the concert hall next door. And it all is part of that same initiative. I know you've got a very busy agenda, so I'm very happy to finish there, but I'm more than willing to answer any questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Lindsay. If members could populate the chat function if you have any questions, and we do. Councillor Forbes.
Thanks, Vice Convener, and thanks for the presentation. One of the slides we saw just a second ago, I think, showed solar panels with stimulated grass stuff underneath them. I therefore assume there would be grass growing in amongst and around the solar panels. Is there an opportunity for animals, whether that be sheep or something else, to graze on those? Yes, absolutely. So the land will be prepared with grasses and wildflower meadows before the construction starts and allowed to bed in, and it will be grazed. And obviously the Bin Farm have their own flock of sheep anyway, so that will continue. But we will do a lot of other biodiversity enhancements. So, for example, along the fence line, we will have small mammal windows, or gates rather, not windows, gates, to allow, foxes and hares, hedgehogs, etc., to be able to move in and out of the site. So it'll be available for the wider wildlife. Yeah.
Councillor Waters.
Thank you, convener, and thank you very much for your presentation. While not a material consideration, I do feel it's still important to ask. Have you any chat with the communities over a community benefit scheme in line with the Scottish Government's standards or advised standards? No, you know what I mean.
Yes, they are. There's guidance. There's guidance being consulted on at the moment on that, and yes, we have, very much so. We've had a really good discussion with Glenfarg, and I don't mind saying I used to live in Glenfarg, and I was actually one of the founding members of the Glenfarg Renewable Energy Association that was very much been involved in the wind turbines up there, and they actually own own one of the turbines up there. So yes, we are, and we also, and I appreciate this is not part of the planning decision, but across all our projects, including the bin, we are also looking with Octopus, who are UK's biggest energy provider, to create a local energy discount scheme. So people living roundabout can actually get direct benefit from the project. And I appreciate that's not part of the planning decision, but hopefully that answers your question.
Councillor Braun.
Thanks, Vice Convener. Thank you for the presentation. There's a battery energy storage on site, you said, and I know the risk these days is lower, but obviously there is a fire risk to these. Is there sufficient access for firefighting equipment to get to it and be able to control the fire? Is there water supply on site for that?
Thank you. Yes, there is. There obviously the if you look at the map's gone, but the battery storage facility and the substation building is on the sort of top left-hand corner. When the map comes up, you'll see it, and that is quite close to some of the farm buildings where there's sort of cattle storage at the moment. So probably 100 meters or so, probably less actually. You can see it there. You can see the farm buildings and an area to the right. So the water will be provided from there. And obviously there's access. There'll be 2 points of access in and out of the battery compound. God forbid we need to have fire engines need to get access to it.
Councillor Allen.
Thanks, Vice Convener. Mr. Lindsay, thank you for your presentation. It's quite something to come with one of these presentations and not have a lot of objectors. But we do have one representation about screening. So if you could just explain what your plan is for that. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, that representation from the screening was actually from a lady who we know very well, who lived to the north about a kilometre away. And actually through her and her husband, we designed the screening at the top end he has a background in this, so it was quite useful to actually agree the types of species of planting, how should be planted. We know full well it's quite exposed up there, so some of the classical trees that you might have chosen elsewhere wouldn't actually take in holes, so we've adapted that. So that's why, again, the map's gone, but the top right-hand side, there is a new band of hedgerows and trees that will be planted, and that was in direct dialogue. We had probably 10 or so emails with that couple, and the gentleman was there at the exhibitions, and we know him well, so we spoke a lot to him. Yeah.
Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, Vice Convener. Thanks for your presentation. Just a quick question. I noticed there's a what's called a weather shelter or something like that. So obviously there's no, I can't remember the exact phrase, but I'm assuming from that it's not going to be normally manned. And if that's not the case, roughly how often would you be having somebody going up there to visit? Thanks.
Well, once it's constructed and is fully commissioned, luckily these projects are very efficient. And typically you might have a white van going up there once every 3 weeks. They're all managed remotely literally on an hour-to-hour basis. So yes, there is no permanent people on site. But the advantage we've got as a potential operator is we do have obviously bin next door in the farm building. So it's great for us from a security point of view. No, there are people around about. So from that, but there is no one will be there full time.
Mr. Lindsay, there's no further questions. You're free to go. Convener, there's no further deputations on this application, so I'll hand back to yourself.
Thank you. Can I ask members if they've got any questions for officers? And straight in is Councillor Allen.
Thank you, Convener. In the photographs and also as part of deputation, we found that there is crop growing going on at the site. And within your own deputation, you suggested that it's not prime agricultural site because it's levels 4 and level 5. Can you maybe just expand on that a bit, please, so as I understand fully?
Yes, so first of all, I would point out that in terms of the planning policies, we can still support a solar farm even if it is prime agricultural land. We try to avoid it, but planning policy does permit that. However, as you've pointed out there, in this case, it ranges from class 4.1 in the east to 5.1 in the west, and it's kind of in between those 2 points. Now, it wouldn't be considered prime agricultural land, and I think it's 3.0 is the boundary. Bailey McLaren looks like she knows.
3-2, I think. 3-1. That what you're stating is what's regarded as crop growing land, which is food producing barley, wheat, whereas lower is not considered to be a crop growing. So 3-2 downwards would be considered to be pasture grazing.
Well, there's your answer, and very eloquently put. Thank you, Bailey McLaren.
Okay, Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, convener. The question I want to ask is related to a previous one relating to the EIA screening and the requirement to carry out an EIA. Again, section 12 of the report, it's all council of the opinion does not constitute an EIA development. It's more a general question, is what would, this is quite a substantial one similar to the last one, what would constitute something where an EIA would be required? Thanks.
Yeah, so that's a fair question. So first of all, we have many EIA developments across Perth and Kinross. So we're quite prone to having EIA developments, but it's where there are significant environmental implications. So not just environmental implications. So for this one, we accept there are environmental implications, but that can be controlled via other surveys. It's where it is significant effects. So for example, if it was a special area that was protected, a site of special scientific interest, if there was a water course that was going to be affected, there's lots of things that come into it. But in this case, really, we're just putting panels in a field. And whilst there are environmental impacts, they're not significant, hence why there's no EIA there. So hopefully that clarifies.
Thank you. Councillor Waters.
Thank you, convener. There's a lot of really good stuff in this report with enhancing biodiversity within the NPF4. Just on benchmarking or given the time it takes to improve biodiversity in an area or something like this, how do you ensure through the conditions that we will see the improvement that's promised? Given it's not at completion, it's not really going to be able to sit and say, here we've improved biodiversity. It's over a longer period of time.
So within the council's planning enforcement team, we have a dedicated monitoring officer who monitors major developments solely. So that officer will be monitoring this through construction, but then we'll also continue to monitor it until such time that we're satisfied that everything has been addressed. So the monitoring officer will keep an eye on making sure that biodiversity enhancements are undertaken.
So is that what you were asking? What if they don't do what's proposed? Is that what you're asking? Because obviously the proposals include quite significant additional biodiversity enhancements, and that is a requirement of the permission, and there are conditions to control that. But I was just not sure if you meant what if they don't do that, because it's quite clear that there are quite significant biodiversity enhancements.
Yeah, it was just to make sure that they are successful, and I think there's a lot in there, and I think kind of Sean did answer it. It's just that confidence that we've got the conditions in there to ensure that the promises or the what's been set out within the planning application is there. So I think it's.
So is it what you're saying? Is there to be monitoring and reassessment of the level of biodiversity undertaken? Is that what you're asking?
Partly, I think.
I think our position is that the biodiversity enhancements are almost certain to see significant increases in biodiversity, but it's not our intention to go and undertake survey work at a later stage.
It's just the process within the council, how we ensure that it is getting delivered. You're not expecting to go down full biodiversity studies separately, but it's just from the planning perspective what is done.
Yeah, so from the planning perspective, the permission requires that the biodiversity enhancements, i.e. the additional planting, I think it was over 2 kilometres of hedgerows, 8,000 trees, etc., are a requirement. That's what is being proposed. And as Sean says, we will undertake monitoring, see if that landscaping work is not being undertaken. But I think we've got confidence in the applicant that they will do what they're saying they're going to do.
Thank you. Any further questions? Further questions? Can I ask for a motion? Councillor Braun.
Yeah, thanks, convener. I think I'm happy to support this one. We often find when we're dealing with solar farms and renewable energy, it's cited in a controversial area with several objections, some cases. In this case, I don't think we have one. I think it's just one minor point raised. It's a situation where we're using land which is of a low grade quality. And as I've said before, I think we're now in a position in Scotland where we can be selective where these renewable energy sites go. But in this case, I think it's a site which seems to be applicable. So I'm happy to support this application.
Thank you. Councillor Waters, you wish to second?
Yes, convener, happy to second. Just, absolutely think this is the right thing to do for that location. I think it's, it's a good application. They have dealt with all the issues. Their consultation with Glenpark Community Council, I've been there a few times, but they've turned up and fully engaged with the community as well to get them on board. Hence, no real objection to it because they've fully explained what they're planning on doing and got the community on board as they move forward with this. Absolutely happy with the biodiversity stuff, and thanks for the answers relating to the role with the planning department and ensuring that is delivered as we do with all planning applications and all stages of a planning application. So more than happy to second this.
Thank you. Can I ask if there's an amendment?
Excuse me, members, just to remind you, you didn't quite say it, Councillor Braun, Councillor Waters, but it would be the report with the updates. Remember the updates? I'm assuming that's what you're agreeing.
Yes, Mr. Elliott. I should have said that. I'm sorry. Yeah.
Thank you. No amendment. Do the members have any comment on the paper? No comment on the paper. Therefore, planning permission is granted with the updated conditions and informative. Thank you. We'll now take a 5-minute recess. Thank you. So we move swiftly on to the next application, and this is for the installation of a 49.9 megawatt battery energy storage system, formation of SUDs, associated infrastructure and landscaping, land 200 metres northwest of Jamesfield Garden Centre, Newborough. And to introduce the report is Mr. Panton.
Thank you, convener. So moving on to the next major application on the agenda today, and we have a 49.9 megawatt battery storage facility and associated works near Abernethy. I'll now take members through a short presentation to detail the proposals further. So only one public objection was received on this application. So like last application, it's only before the planning committee as it constitutes a major development. So here we can see the location of the site, which is immediately northwest of the Abernethy substation and to the west of Jamesfield Garden Centre. Members should note that there are already a number of consented battery storage proposals which have been granted in this vicinity, given the proximity to the Abernethy substation. As part of this application, we have considered the cumulative impact and consider that there are no adverse concerns. Next slide, please. We now see a proposed site plan where you can see there are 2 access routes to the site. This is a requirement for fire protection purposes. The site is currently in agricultural use and does constitute Grade 2 prime agricultural land on this occasion. However, whilst the loss of prime agricultural land is regrettable, we consider this to be an acceptable location for a battery storage facility due to being immediately adjacent to the Abernethy substation. Next slide, please. We now have proposed elevations for the battery units themselves. They measure approximately 12.2 metres at maximum length, 2.4 metres at maximum width, and 2.8 metres at maximum height. 48 of these units are proposed. Next slide, please. We now have a more detailed site plan. Here you can see some of the proposed landscaping and the sustainable urban drainage pond. Condition 7 will ensure that appropriate planting is undertaken. Next slide, please. Here we have a visualisation of how the facility will look when viewed from the adjacent farm track. As you can see, it appears like a collection of storage containers. Next slide, please. We now move on to a series of recent photographs taken by the case officer on their site visit. This first photograph shows the site under question. You can note here that there are 2 pylon transmission routes that currently exist. Next image, please. This next photograph again shows the site, this time looking back towards Abernethy. Next image, please. This final photograph now shows the site in the winter, looking back towards the substation where the proposal will connect into. Next slide, please. Thank you, Convener. That now concludes my presentation. I will leave members with the proposed site plan for reference. Before doing so, members should note that the circulated update to the report, which requires additional paragraphs, conditions and informatives to be added. In addition to this, members should note that the final page of the report indicates that no letters of representation were received. This is incorrect, as 1 letter of objection was received, as detailed within paragraph 40 of your reports. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Panton. And we have deputation on this, so I'll hand over to the Vice Convener for the deputation procedures.
Thank you, Convener. Can I call on Ms. Fletcher, applicant? Good morning. Are you comfortable with the procedures? So whenever you're ready to start, I'll start the clock.
Thank you very much. Good morning, Chair, and good morning, members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to speak in support of this application. My name is Tessa Fletcher, Senior Planning Manager at Harmony Energy, and we're the applicant. Founded and headquartered in the UK, Harmony Energy is a leading developer, builder, owner and operator of renewable energy infrastructure, with an established track record of delivering battery storage energy projects here in Britain. We currently operate 17 battery energy storage sites nationwide, including the nearby 49 megawatt facility to the east of the garden centre, which was successfully constructed and energised in January 2024. Throughout the determination of this application, we have worked closely with the case officer and would like to thank the Council for its thorough and professional assessment. We welcome the officer's recommendation for approval and agree with the conclusion reached in the report that there are no material planning considerations which outweigh the provisions of the development plan. We also note that only 1 public representation was received and that there are no outstanding objections from any statutory consultees. This proposal is for a 49.9 battery energy storage facility capable of storing sufficient energy to supply the equivalent of more than 160,000 homes for up to 4 hours. This development would also help avoid approximately 6,000 tonnes of carbon dioxide equivalent emissions each year by supporting the integration of renewable energy into the electrical network. In addition to its environmental benefits, the project would make a meaningful contribution to the local economy during the construction and operation, and can provide the opportunity for local supply chains and local trades to be used during the construction of the development. At Harmony, we're proud to work closely with communities around our sites, and we'll be offering a community benefit fund of £5,000 per annum. In addition, when Newborough Junior Football Club needed new tracksuits for the next season, 26-27 season, they came to us and we said yes, sponsoring the club for the full season. That support does more than put our name on the tracksuit. Sponsorship takes a real cost off the volunteer-run club, and that keeps training sessions and match days happening, things that people benefit from both physically and mentally. Where we can, we back local groups that need our support throughout the lifetime of the development. This has included commitments to support the promotion of the adjacent garden centre during the construction period and again during the operation of the development. As the officer's report confirms, the proposal accords with all relevant local and national policies. This conclusion is reinforced by the absence of any objections from the statutory consultees, demonstrating that the technical and environmental matters associated with the development have been fully assessed and satisfactorily addressed. It is recognised that the development would occupy approximately 5 hectares of Class 2 agricultural land. However, this represents only 0.003% of agricultural land within Perth and Kinross and will enable the landowner the additional income to support his remaining holding. As acknowledged in the committee report, the site's location immediately adjacent to the existing substation is fundamental to the project's purpose, allowing the battery storage facility to make efficient use of existing grid infrastructure and available network capacity while minimising the need for additional infrastructure elsewhere. We have worked constructively with the only public respondent, the Garden Centre, and have made sure to understand and respond to their concerns throughout the application. And prior to the application, we went to visit them and worked with them in designing the scheme also. A detailed noise impact assessment has been undertaken, considering both the proposed development and cumulative impacts from other nearby consented schemes if they were to come forward. The assessment demonstrates that predicted noise levels comfortably meet both daytime and nighttime criteria and confirm that there will be no unacceptable impact on neighbouring receptors. We recognise the Garden Centre's concerns regarding construction traffic. These matters have been carefully considered through ongoing discussions with both the Council and the Garden Centre. A construction traffic management strategy has been prepared in partnership with the Garden Centre and the Council, and this will be secured through Condition 17, ensuring the construction activities are appropriately managed and impacts are minimised. In conclusion, the proposed development has been carefully designed to minimise impacts on the surroundings while delivering significant environmental and economic benefits. It is fully compliant with the development plan, supported by national planning policy, and will make an important contribution towards Scotland's transition to a low-carbon energy system. For those reasons, we respectfully ask the committee to support the officer's recommendation and grant planning permission. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Fletcher. You're willing to take questions from members? Members, if you have any questions, please populate the chat function. And we'll start off with Councillor Harvey. Your first question, please.
Thank you, Vice Convener, and thank you for your presentation. Just a quick, kind of almost technical question. I notice in section 6, part of your development includes a small substation, 132, 33 kilovolt substation. Is that to allow further developments in addition to the existing substation, or is that for your own use within your facility itself? Thanks.
Sorry. Yes, that's to accommodate our facility to get the electricity in the correct capacity to then be able to feed into the substation.
Councillor Forbes.
Thanks for attending today and answering our questions. You said in your presentation that this would create meaningful employment. I think you said both during and after the construction phase. But the previous paper we heard on a similar topic, the agent kind of said that there'd be the odd white van every now and then, but pretty much they're remotely monitored. So I'm wondering what level of employment you would expect this to bring to the area once it's constructed and on stream.
Yes, thank you. So once the site is operational, there won't be anyone permanently at the site, but there will be the need for ongoing landscaping maintenance. And that tends to be people we get locally to come in and do the works. So it's that kind of the maintenance of the landscaping. They'll, again, like the previous applicant said, there will be the odd technical attendant to the site to maintain the equipment. But that will be sporadic white van, whereas the more local and ongoing roles will be associated with maintaining the landscaping around the site. Thank you.
Councillor Braun, your first question.
Thanks for asking me. Thank you for your deputation. We've heard from the introduction there are several battery sites here, of which one is yours. So my question to you is why site here, and have you checked other areas where you could have sited this away from prime land?
Thank you. Yes, so you're correct. We do have an existing site which we worked very closely with the Garden Centre a number of years ago to construct. This, we then went, there was further capacity available at Abernethy substation. We applied for that and wanted to get as close to the substation as possible. It's regrettable, admittedly, that it's on prime agricultural land. We do acknowledge that, but all the land in that area is of good value, high value finding parcels of land that are at a lower grade, but would be able to have not impact the wider landscape and also be well related to the substation was a challenge. We have a grid connection agreed to connect into that substation, which is why we're in this area. And we felt that that field would enable the best connection physically into the substation, but also visibly as well. It enables us to do a lot of screening around the front of the site from the road that runs adjacent. So there was a lot of design tweaking during the pre-application, both with the council during the PAN process, but also with the garden centre we've worked closely with.
Bailey McLaren.
Thank you, Vice Convener. My question was basically very similar to Councillor Braun's, and I feel it's probably been answered in the main, but I would just like maybe a further understanding of what other sites, have you evaluated other sites? Because clearly there is a cumulative impact within this area, and there is a visual impact here. So were there any other sites that would have been more what's the word I'm trying to find, more you could have evaluated alongside this? Was this really your primary option?
Yes, thank you. So I think the starting point for your answer is our grid director goes around all the substations and finds a substation that has capacity, and that's the starting point for us finding land. We find a substation, Abernethy substation, that has capacity for us to connect into. We get an agreement with a national grid that we can connect into that site. We then go and approach nearby landowners to see who would be willing to accommodate it, and alongside look at other constraints on land around that substation. Our grid connection has to be to that substation, so we can't relocate to a different substation to connect into. So that's the starting point. We then, like I said, need a landowner that's willing to have our development on their site, but also we want to be as close to the substation as possible to maintain those efficiencies within the grid. Visually, I mean, this site is quite well constrained. There's not a huge number of viewpoints that can see the site, which I think is demonstrated by how there's only one objection to the scheme. Even our public consultation events weren't very well attended because people would, even the nearby residents just didn't have concerns visually about it. Like I say, it's regrettable. It's on high agricultural land, but high grade agricultural land, but all the land in the, surrounding area has been graded of similar quality. And the fact that we are as close to the substation as possible with a willing landowner that's going to enable them to diversify the rest of their business was the leading factor for us. Oh.
So there were no other sites available that had a capacity and potential landowners, is what you're saying? Is that correct?
Yes, this was deemed the most suitable site for our development, yes.
Councillor Allen.
Thank you, Vice Convener. Thank you for your deputation. You've made reference yourself to the fact that there was one objector. I've probably got a good idea who it is, but can you just tell us who that objector is and have you worked with them on their objections? Thank you.
Yes, so the objection was from the garden centre. We've worked very closely with them from before this development came into fruition. We worked with them during the development of our previous site, our Jamesfield site on to the east of the garden centre, because our development actually used their garden centre as the construction point. So we've had a relationship with the garden centre for a long time. When we first started looking at this site, we approached them again and said, this is what we're wanting to do. Obviously, we can appreciate they're not thrilled about it. They don't want any development that could jeopardise their business. completely understandable, but we have worked closely with them. I've visited their site a couple of times and liaised with them during the preparation of the application and during the application. And I think their objection does, well, it's an objection, it does say that they don't want any more battery development around their site. But if anyone wants to build it out, it would be ourselves because of the relationship we formed with them, which is a fair enough comment to make. And we have made a commitment to them that during the construction, we will ensure that vehicle movements don't interrupt their business. We will help them with marketing of their garden centre during the course of the development as well, which is something that we did during the construction of the previous site, and any other kind of marketing that they would like to do, we will assist with. So I'm hopeful that those relationships will continue, and we can visit the garden centre going forwards as the scheme is developed, if approved.
Thank you for your answer. That's good. Thank you. One of the things that was within the objection was no community benefits, and I know that that's not a material consideration. It's something that you agree with, and you make the offer. You made an offer of £5,000 a year, I understand. Do you think that that's sufficient?
So that is so we offer community benefit funds across all of our sites, and the threshold we use is £100 per megawatt, which is where we've arrived at that figure. That's a kind of standard to make it fair and consistent across all of our sites. But on top of that, we do also do additional benefits where local communities have asked for them, for example, the football club, and sponsoring them for a year. So based on other sites that we have and other developers, community benefit fund contributions that are made, we feel that the £5,000 per annum is fair, but we're also happy to top that with additional community benefits as one-off where requested, for example, the football club as well.
Convener Massey.
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation. You stated in your presentation that has the potential to supply 150,000 homes for 4 hours. It's a question I've never really thought about. I told you just now. How many times has the installation that you've got at the moment had to drain their batteries to top up the supply in the system?
Oh, that is a really good question. And how I would explain it is that our batteries charge up when there's an oversupply and discharge when there's an undersupply into the grid, and that can happen once or twice per day. In terms of what, I'm sorry, I'm not sure if I'm able to answer that technical question in terms of the batteries being drained, but they are used on a daily basis to maintain that the balance of the grid supply.
Councillor Harvey, your second question.
Thanks, Vice Convener. Just a follow-up to Councillor Allen's question. So as regards the James Fields Garden Centre, you didn't definitively say, do they still object to your development, or are they okay with it? Or are we still in kind of grey area? Thanks.
Well, they haven't revoked their objection to it. You know, they haven't lifted their objection to the scheme, but they also haven't come along today to object to it. I've spoken to her recently about it to continue those discussions as we get closer to the decision and put measures in place, and also to make sure that the wording of the construction traffic management plan, which is one she was really concerned about, that she was comfortable that would cover what she wanted. So I would say it's a grey area, but we do have a good relationship with the garden centre.
Councillor Braun, your second question.
Thanks, Vice Convener. Just to clarify myself, and we're talking about storage, as it goes, just to get it clear, battery storage, you don't generate electricity, you store it. And the second thing is, you mentioned what you stored. My understanding is it stores electrical energy, that's it. But you can't tell where that comes from. It could be renewable, it could be traditional sources. So it's not really purely, you mentioned storing renewable energy, but it's just energy itself. It's not gauged just the renewable. Is that correct?
Yes, that's absolutely correct. Yes. So we take energy from national grid supply. There's no way of distinguishing whether that's renewable energy or whether that's non-renewable energy. However, by bringing more battery sites online, what we are able to do is become more reliant on renewable energy. So at the moment, the peaks and troughs from, when it's dark, so there's no solar or less solar, or when it's not windy, so there's less energy being generated, we're currently relying on fossil fuel methods for energy, whereas actually by being able to store the energy at times of high wind and high solar, we can then store it and feed it back into the grid, and it just balances out the sporadicity, I suppose, of renewable energy. But you're correct, it's not a generator although in planning terms it is under the same umbrella in terms of its value, because it recognises the need to balance the supply of renewable schemes.
You made reference to landscaping, and if you're using trees, is there recognition of strong westerly winds and then sudden northerly winds and shallow rooted trees and toppling into your infrastructure?
Thank you. Yes, there is. And there's also overhead lines going across part of the site, so they've been taken into consideration as well, because it does look, when you look at the plan without the overhead line shown, it does look strange where we've located the landscaping, but that's exactly what we've done, is brought all those kind of assessments together to put the landscaping in the best possible locations, primarily for visibility purposes, to help screen the development, but also to ensure that they're not going to impact on any proposed or existing infrastructure at the site.
Ms. Fletcher, there appears to be no further questions. You're free to go. Convener, there's no further deputations on this application, so I'll hand back to yourself.
Thank you. Can I ask members if they've got any questions for officers? Councillor Waters.
Thank you, convener. I think one of the comments with James Field, who said, we've got we don't want any more of these battery storage in our area. And there is, and I know in your presentation, Sean, you kind of said that you were happy with the cumulative, that we're okay cumulative. I think what I would like to see, and it's probably too late to get this off you, is a map to show where all the other sites that are operational and planned are within the area, because we've got this grid hotspot type thing as described, and we've got all these businesses looking where the capacity is and then trying to get as close to that as possible. You're creating a real cumulative impact element just because of the design, the business models and how they work. What assurances can you give us that or where that line is, where it is one area that's getting all these battery storage area and it's not getting spread out evenly because of the grid connection? What assurance can you give us from the cumulative effect that we've not crossed that line?
I think, as we often say, well, it depends on the specifics of the situation. I think it was fine. Depends on the specifics of the situation, and the fact is we're balancing various considerations here, so cumulative impact is only one. Fact is we have a significant size substation here which has capacity to allow energy to flow in and out of the grid. This proposal balances the demands across the grid as well, so it makes perfect sense in various aspects as to why this type of proposal would be located here. The primary relevant policies of National Planning Framework 4 support it. So although, yes, there are a number of proposals within proximity to the Jamesfield substation, on balance, although there is a cumulative impact, that is in this circumstance considered to be acceptable. What the situation elsewhere might be depends on that situation, but what the balancing of policies, etc., doesn't say, well, you need to spread it out evenly across the entirety of the region. That's not the case. So we wouldn't say, because there are two here already, we need to bump it away somewhere else. We would go, is there appropriate capacity in terms of all the factors to be taken into account to locate another facility here. And that's what we've been doing on the very specific circumstances in and around Jamesfield.
I can just come in on the back of that as well to the first part of your question. So just about where the location of the other ones are. So first of all, for any member of the public or anybody listening, they're all publicly available, and I've just put a link in the chat. It's on the Perth and Kinross Council website. You just put in renewable energy proposals, and there's a map there that shows everything. But for the purposes of this committee, I can quickly talk through it. So immediately next to Jamesfield Garden Centre, we do have another 3 proposals. As we heard from the deputation, there's one operational just now, just to the kind of northeast. There's also another consented one between the A913 and Jamesfield, and then further along back down the railway towards Abernethy, there's one there as well. But members will also note from this committee previously, there was another one further along yet again at Cordon Farm, but the ones relevant today are the 3 at Jamesfield. So there are 3 consented there. But that is exactly where the substation is. So you would, like the deputy said, they look for as close as possible to the substation. So in answer to your question, there is a map showing it. I've put a link in the chat, and there are 3 immediately next to the garden centre and power station substation, but there are also some further down at Cordon.
Thank you. Councillor Harvey.
Thanks, Convener. I'm just looking at the map. I just have one question. I have another question, but one about the map. Are the orange, is the orange the proposed ones and the yellow one the already built ones?
Neither. The orange is battery storage and yellow is solar.
Okay. Okay. It's very similarly related to Councillor Waters' question as well too, and I understand you can only comment individually on developments as well. But because the planning of this is based around where the substation is something we do not have control of, I assume you always have thoughts about what developments would be acceptable. This obviously has passed the test, but I'm kind of assuming any further ones would go through the same kind of test and the same kind of issue as regards cumulative effects. Yeah.
Yes, you're correct. So these things aren't sightly in nature. We acknowledge that, but appropriate landscaping and colouring and stuff can help soften it. And we need to accept as well that the substation itself is not sightly. So really it is just an expansion of that. I would also point out that where we do think there is an impact, we are more than happy to recommend refusal, as we did for the one at Cordon Farm. However, this committee overturned that and approved it.
Thank you. Councillor Forbes.
Thanks, Convener. One of the issues that was raised with me by the garden centre is the potential for fire, and she's saying I have to accept that she knows this better than I do. She says there's no fire hydrant or access to water anywhere nearby. Is that something, A, is that correct, and is that something that we would or have taken into account?
Thanks, Councillor Forbes. So most of that's controlled through the building warrant process, but as we saw in my presentation, there are 2 access tracks to this site, and that's a fire requirement that they have to have more than one access to the site. So from a planning perspective, they've met all they need to in terms of fire protection. It will now be over to the building stage to control that further.
And sorry, Councillor Forbes, I think I'm sure that the applicant maybe could have explained what their approach to fire risk, etc. was, and I'm sure that they have various things both on site and in terms of their action plans associated. It is a question that regularly is asked at this committee, but at this point in time, the planning regulations do not include for all those sorts of questions to be answered, and there are separate legislative controls. However, there is work ongoing at a national level that we hope to see come forward with guidance on what standards would be expected and should be set out at the planning application stage. But it's not something that we take into significant account at the minute, but there is work ongoing at a higher level, including the fire and rescue service, etc.
Thank you. Councillor Allen.
Thank you, Convener. It's a question and a point of clarification, hopefully from the officers as well. Earlier on, when we were talking about the solar farm at Strathmiglo, Mr. Lindsay told us that the prime agricultural land, if it was all used, was 0.007. And in the current deputation we've just had from Miss Fletcher, she suggested it was 0.003. Now, it doesn't matter what that percentage is. If it's wrong, and we'll determine that as a committee. But have you got any clarification on what the number is?
I think that Mr. Lindsay was talking about his solar farm, which was covering a much larger area than this battery storage facility, and the applicant here was talking about their particular proposal. I think there was also a discussion on what different types of agricultural land, but in short, one is very big and one is very small in terms of its overall size. Exactly what the mathematics and calculations were in relation to that, I don't know. Those are questions for those parties that have put those figures before you today. Those are not figures that have been used by ourselves, or we've not been privy to the calculations associated. So all I would say is the solar farm was much bigger than the SPES facility.
Thank you. Any further questions? No further questions. Therefore, can I ask for a motion?
Sorry, apologies, convener. I was trying to get the queue in there quickly, but I just can I ask just one very quick. The pylons running over the site. I know SSEN didn't raise any objections when contacted. Did the fire risk, because SSEN don't raise any risk? Remember a previous one with the railways raised an issue over potential fire. But if you've got pylons going over battery storage and there's a fire risk, and my understanding that's one of the main pylons for the big grid connection through Scotland. But is there not surely a risk in there? Don't want to, not the expert in SSEN or the thing, but just as a common sense thing, I thought there would have been quite a risk in there that if there is a fire on that site, it could bring down a lot of electricity in Scotland. Wherever it being considered at all, or do we just trust SSEN are considering that?
So you're absolutely spot on there, and that was actually one of the errors in the report that's covered in the update. So in the update document, you will see that SSEN did have recommended conditions. So we're therefore applying those two recommended conditions and informatives. And one of them is about no storage of materials or plant machinery within 10 metres of the 132 kilovolt Charleston Abernethy overhead transmission line. There's another one about a construction traffic management plan, so that obviously if cranes and stuff are going through, they don't clip a pylon. So yeah, it wasn't covered in the report, and that was an error, and it's now been covered in the update. But they did have concerns, and conditions will control that.
Thank you. Can I ask for a motion? Councillor Braun.
Yeah, thanks, convener. I am of a mind to move to refuse this application. I have some concerns on this. So trying to pull all that together, if I can just start, my concern is the loss of prime agricultural land, which is in contravention of policy 50 of LDP2. So that's where I'm coming from. But my concern here is that yes, there is an exception for essential infrastructure, but we have several battery storage facilities agreed in this area. Which one is with the applicant? I don't think that there's been enough investigation to assess whether this is the only site. The fact that it's only 253 metres of cabling to make it work, I don't think is sufficient justification for an exception here on prime agricultural land. I think that is a concern. Cabling can be run over distances. There's never any need for a battery storage to be right next to a substation. We've heard this before. I accept the point that's been raised by the applicant and previous applicant about the percentages. I'm not sure if they're right or wrong. I'm never a great lover of statistics. The old story, lies, damn lies, and statistics comes to mind. But I'm not saying they're wrong or right. But yeah, every time we have one of these, it comes back, or it's just 0.5% of agricultural land, 0.05 or whatever. This is accumulating up over and over again, and we are starting to lose our prime agricultural land. And I think there needs to be a care taken in all of these. As I say, I don't believe that there's been enough investigation to assess whether other sites are available. The effect is local is not, in my mind, sufficient enough. There's an accumulation in this area, and I feel there is a steady industrialisation of this small part of Perth and Kinross which is occurring. And I think we've all had a copy, and this might need some clarification from Mr. Elliott on this, but clarification of a recent judgment by the reporter on another site, well away from here. And there are comments made within that which state that battery storage doesn't generate electricity. It's not a generator of renewable energy. It's a storage facility, which is basic science, of course. And then there's another factor that obviously it doesn't store only renewable energy. It stores any energy that's coming along. So the concept that it's an essential piece of infrastructure is perhaps lower down the rank. But trying to tie it all together, my thoughts on this. But my real concern is that we're losing prime agricultural land yet again. We've seen a previous application this morning where it's cited away from main areas in land which is not essentially high-class agricultural land. That's fine. But I don't think the people who framed NPF 4 had in mind that every piece of prime agricultural land was up for grabs simply because it's essential infrastructure. I don't think that was what it was about. I think there has to be a sense of judgment here, of selection. And I said it before, and I've said it in previous applications. We can afford to be selective of where these go. And I think in this case, it's the wrong location. So the core of my thought is LP to policy 50. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor James, you wish to second?
Yeah, thanks, convener. I agree with everything that Councillor Braun has said. I mean, quite often, these things come forward as, renewable energy. It's not renewable energy. It's storage of, and we don't know what the source of the energy is anyway. And yes, while they say it's going to create employment, it's currently employing somebody, a farmer, and it's prime agricultural land. How much prime agricultural land do we have to get rid of in order to achieve net zero, which is unachievable? But anyway, everything that Councillor Braun has said, convener, I'm happy to second. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any amendment? Okay, I'll put in an amendment, and I'll put the amendment in that we grant permission for this. I think the loss of that prime agricultural land is something that we have to bear. The benefits of having the battery energy storage close to the substation are paramount to the viability of these facilities. I think it's the most viable option to have them close to the substation. Therefore, I will be putting forward the amendment to grant permission. I believe, Councillor Stewart, you wish to second.
Convener, yes, I'd like to second. I think this is an important infrastructure to help smooth out the national grid, and weighing up pros and cons, I'd like to second the amendment.
Okay, thank you. Can I ask members if they've got any comment on the report? No comment on the report. Okay. Right, I will forego my summing up. I'll now ask Councillor Braun if he wishes to sum up.
Nothing from me.
Thank you. Okay, then I'll now hand over to Mr. Elliott, the legal procedures.
In the moment, we have a motion by Councillor Braun, seconded by Councillor James to refuse. And I'll come on to the terms in a second. I do have some concerns that would have to be clearly expressed in terms of the breach of policy. The amendment by Councillor Massey, seconded by Councillor Stewart, is to grant in line with the amended, I think it's an amended report. Yes. You said quite a lot, Councillor Braun, in terms of putting forward your motion, and I won't go through it all because there's an awful lot of issues that you raised there. But I would point out that you referred to the LDP policy. Now, you really have to look at the MPF4 policy, policy 5, and development proposal, and it does allow for development on primary, specifically allows for development primary agricultural land for what's called essential infrastructure. And this is, I appreciate your main comments, it's not generating electricity. I would say that's not relevant because it comes under the category. So therefore, in terms of policy 5, this type of proposal is allowed on primary agricultural land. So you would have to specify where it's in breach of the policy. Now, you've mentioned cumulative impact. Cumulative impact isn't particularly dealt with in the policy, but it's something which is legitimate to consider. Now, if you're considering refusing on cumulative impact, you have to specify what the cumulative impact is and why that's unacceptable. Now, you were referring to potential for other sites. I'm going to make neutral comments, but be careful. I'm not going to giving a view either way, but what you have to address is that this is the site closest to the substation. The connection would be the shortest possible. If you have a site elsewhere, that would be a longer connection. And also knowing the kind of general area in terms of the road and as the report addresses, that is screened in terms of the cumulative impact. You're adding to something that's already there and relatively screened. So what I'm saying is you have to address which policy, where it's breached, and then describe why. So at the moment, you've referred to the LDP policy, but I would draw your attention to the MPF4 policy. It is legitimate to have this proposal on primary agricultural land. So you would have to then say, what is it actually breaching and why? And the only thing I've heard so far in terms of it is the cumulative impact. But then you have to address what is the cumulative impact? What is the issue? Not just there's too many in the area, but what is the impact that's unacceptable? Sorry, just to explain, I will explain briefly, although we were adjourned for a long time, quite a long time. I spent a lot of time explaining the terms of the policies, both in the LDP and especially National Planning Framework 4. I reiterated what I was saying in public about, on the face of it, because it's a BESS, it is not contrary to policy 5 of MPF4 because it's allowed to be on primary agricultural land. Now, having had all that discussion, the terms of a motion I kind of have written down, and I'm happy to narrate that for Councillor Braun and Councillor James. Before I do so, and it is basically on cumulative impact, I would say that I'm going to stress that although it's a competent motion, I think it's a difficult motion to put forward, and it would be a difficult appeal. And you've heard me say that before, and it would be problematic on appeal. And I've said it beforehand, this is a site right next to a substation. It is the shortest connection. Now, the terms of the motion is to refuse on the basis that the proposal is contrary to National Planning Framework 4, 2023, Policy 5 Soils, and Perth and Cross Local Development Plan 2, 2019, Policy 50, Prime Agricultural Land, as the proposal is not on a suitable site as it involves the loss of prime agricultural land and will, by virtue of its cumulative impact with other consented developments, industrialise the area. Okay, so I'm hopefully that Councillor Braun and Councillor James, is that the correct phraseology?
Happy with that. Thank you, Mr. Elliott.
Convener, just to the motion by Councillor Braun, seconded by Councillor James, is, as I've just narrated, to refuse on cumulative impact or industrialisation of the area. The amendment by yourself, Convener, seconded by the Vice Convener, is to approve per updated report. updated conditions, etc. So it's motion refuse, amendment grant.
Members, when I call out your name, if you can advise whether you're voting for the motion to refuse or for the amendment, which is to approve the updated report. Councillor Allen.
Motion.
Councillor Braun.
Motion.
Councillor Cuthbert.
Motion.
Councillor Forbes.
Motion.
Councillor Harvey.
Amendment.
Councillor James.
Motion.
Councillor Massey.
Amendment.
Bailey McLaren.
Motion.
Councillor Stewart.
Amendment.
And Councillor Waters.
Amendment.
We have 6 votes for the motion and 4 votes for the amendment. Therefore, the motion will carry.
Thank you for that. Therefore, planning permission is refused. Thank you. Now move on to the next item, which is, this is probably going to be the longest one I've ever read out in my life. This is for a Section 42 application to vary conditions 1, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 12, 15, 19, 22, 23, 24, 26, 32, 33, 34, 35, 36, 38, 39, 41, 40, 42, 43, 45, 46, 49, 50 and 53 of planning permission in principle at Perth West. And to introduce the report again is Mr. Panton. Thank you.
Very well read out, convener. So we now move on to the next and final major application today, which relates to Perth West. This application also has no public objections and is only before committee as it constitutes a major application. I'll now take members through a short presentation to detail the proposals further. So here we can see the location of the site. As the name would suggest, the site is to the west of Perth, to the west of Broxton Roundabout specifically. The site is approximately 257 hectares and is allocated as a mixed-use development, MU70, in the Perth and Kinross Local Development Plan 2. Planning permission in principle for a large-scale mixed-use development was granted on this site in November 2023. At the time the decision was issued, the conditions were written on the assumption that the first approval of matters application would comprise of a large-scale development, and as such the conditions were quite onerous. What is now likely to happen is that the first approval of matters application will be a small-scale application submitted by ourselves at Perth and Kinross Council rather than private developers. This application would be for the creation of an underpass to access the site and open up future opportunities. Given that this is a small-scale proposal, it is no longer considered proportionate that all of the onerous planning conditions must be satisfied as part of the first approval of matters application. This current application before you today therefore seeks to amend the wording of various conditions to allow for smaller scale applications to come forward without having to satisfy all of the relevant conditions. Please note that we are not deleting any of the attached conditions. We are simply rewording them to ensure that they are only required to be satisfied at the relevant phase of the development. All conditions will therefore remain to be satisfied, but will be more proportionately applied. Next slide, please. We now have the indicative plan that form part of the planning permission in principle. The application before you today does not seek to amend any of the plans that were submitted with the original in principle application. Next slide, please. Now have a drone shot of part of the site when viewed from the south looking north. You can just see Broxton Roundabout to the right of the image. Next slide, please. The secondary drone shot again shows the site, this time looking from north to south. You can just make out Lamberkin Drive to the left of the image. Next slide, please. Thank you, convener. That now concludes my presentation. I will leave members with the proposed site plan for reference. Before doing so, members should note that a small update is required to condition 35, and that's purely to specify that the required document is a design and access statement. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Panton. We do have a deputation on this item, so I'll now hand over to the Vice Convener for the deputation procedures.
Thank you, convener. Can I call Mr. Fletcher? Now, Mr. Fletcher is not making a deputation, but is willing to take questions. Mr. Fletcher is a roads infrastructure senior engineer he's here representing the applicant. So members, if you have any questions, please populate the chat function. Councillor Harvey.
Well, I'll ask a question. I was going to ask the officers, but I'll ask you. We heard the detail of what this change is required. Could you just give us a kind of practical or summary of what the change from previous to now is in spirit?
Yeah, there's not really any actual change to any of the proposals. This is purely kind of phasing. So what me and my team are doing just now is we're you hear me, yeah? We are preparing a scheme for an underpass, road and platforming for the Perth Eco Innovation Park. And as Sean said earlier, the conditions were very onerous for such a small kind of infrastructure scheme. So our consultants on our behalf have prepared a submission just to break the conditions down so they're applicable per phase of what you're doing. So we are currently preparing an approval of matters submission that will come forward hopefully in the next month or so, and that will tie in with this new wording for these conditions, and it will make that a lot more streamlined and sensible.
So is the changes to do with the phasing then of the development?
Yeah, it's just the phasing for the conditions. Yeah, that's all it is.
Mr. Fletcher, there's no further questions. You're free to go. Convener, there's no further deputations on this application, and I'll hand back to yourself.
Thank you. Can I ask members if they have any questions for officers? No questions for officers? For a motion, Councillor Harvey, I see you've got Eamon.
Yep. Motion to accept the paper as is.
And Councillor Cuthbert, you wish to second?
Happy to second.
Thank you. Can I ask if there's any amendment? Amendment. Do members have any comment on the report? No comment on the report, then permission is granted with the updated conditions. Thank you. And the section 75 as well. Okay, move swiftly on to the local application. And this is for the erection of 8 holiday accommodation units and associated works land southwest of Milton of Castle Strathday. And to introduce the report is not Mr. Patton, it's Mr. Smith.
Thank you, convener. And if we could just move to the first slide, please. So as you say, the next application relates to proposals by Castle Estate for 8 lodges. It is, yes. Just to move closer. Thank you. So as you say, convener, this next application relates to proposals by Castle Estate for 8 lodges providing tourist accommodation close to the River Tay in what is currently a field southwest of Strathday Village and identified as being within the conservation area. Different forms of lodges and landscaping are proposed with access to be from the east along an existing track which will be upgraded. I'll take you through some further slides to get more context shortly. 57 representations were made, 41 objecting and 16 in support. The issues raised being set out in the report. Other than the Community Council, no objections were raised from the various formal consultees. This includes the Council's Conservation Team and Perth and Kinross Heritage Trust. Questions over the way in which the application has been processed have been raised and responded to, clarifying that the appropriate procedures are considered to have been followed. I also understand that there have been circulations to members since the publication of the committee papers. The image on screen is an aerial view showing the extent of the site and some of the features surrounding it, such as the Tay, wooded areas, roads, fields and groupings of buildings in the area, primarily Struth Tay to the north. If you could note the narrow red arm that extends from above the main body of the site and links to the road which runs through Struth Tay. This was to include a secondary access route, which is now no longer proposed. Next slide, please. Now we see a closer aerial view showing the field to which the application relates in the lower middle of the image. Next slide, please. Here we see the site and the originally proposed layout, that now having been updated, as I say, to take account of some concern over the uniform layout of the lodges. Additionally, the initially proposed and new secondary access track east to west, as I said, is no longer proposed. The superseded detail is shown to provide further context to the original scheme, the location and surroundings. Next slide, please. Next, we have some images of two of the lodge types themselves, including elevations and floor plans. Next slide, please. This slide showing the third lodge type. Next slide. This final drawing shows the now proposed layout of the lodges, which are in a less uniform arrangement. Also indicated is the landscaping. Next slide. Here we move to a series of photographs to give some visual context. Firstly, we see left and right from close to the junction where the access would be taken off the public road just north of the bridge across the Tay. The junction itself being just beside the wheelie bin and cottage in the right-hand image. The photos taken from the junction to Struth Tay at the adjacent War Memorial, not the junction where access would be taken itself. The road here has a 20-mile-an-hour limit and the bridge itself is limited to 10 miles per hour. Next slide. The next pair of images see the left-hand image showing the setback from the junction. You'll note the bins and building from the earlier photo either side. The width of the access at this point was measured by our roads colleagues at 3.3 metres. The right-hand image is further along the access road, showing an existing place to pass. Next slide, please. This further image shows the existing field access and mature tree planting to the north of the field within which the lodges would be located, those trees providing visual separation from Struth Tay. Next slide. Now back to a pair of images, the left hand looking west across the application site from the access track. Struth Tay village properties are beyond the trees and elevated. The right-hand image is again from the track, but looking east. Lodges would be beyond the post and wire fence, with an individual drive off the track, which, as I say, is to be upgraded. Next slide, please. These final images show the existing track, and the final slide, which I'll leave you with, shows the finally proposed layout and landscaping, with the secondary access removed. Thank you, Convener. That concludes the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. And we do have deputations on this item as well. So I'll now hand over to the Vice Convener for the deputations procedure.
Thank you, Convener. Can I call Ms. Houston, objector to the application? Thank you for your patience. I'm sure you're aware of the procedure. Whenever you're ready to start, I'll start the clock. And could you bend the microphone towards you so people online can hear?
Hear me okay? Thank you. My name is Helen Hurston and I live in Struth Tay. I speak on behalf of the 48 people who submitted objections to this application. The report refers to 41 objections. I can guarantee you the correct figure is 48. This is not an objection to tourism or rural business diversification. It is an objection to this proposal on this site because every development, however desirable, must comply with the planning policies and protections that apply to it. Where policy requires something to be demonstrated, the evidence should be clear. It is against that planning framework that we have considered this application. The law requires special attention when considering applications in a conservation area. NPF 4 and LDP 2 policies require that development within a conservation area must preserve or enhance its character and appearance. The conservation area appraisal makes clear that the River Tay, the mature trees, and the village's open riverside spaces are fundamental to Strathtay's character and setting. The Conservation Officer's report raised concerns over siting, layout, density, materials, and character. Although revised plans were submitted, no follow-up assessment explains why these points are now considered resolved. The proposal remains on the same piece of open riverside land. It is the last open riverside space within the conservation area. Its value lies precisely in its openness. Building on open land is, by definition, a permanent loss of openness. That is not preservation, it is not enhancement, it is permanent harm. Once lost, it is gone forever. So how does the permanent loss of the last defining open riverside space preserve or enhance the conservation area? The report reaches that conclusion. It doesn't explain how. My second point concerns policies 8 and 9 of the local development plan. These policies support tourism development, but only where policy tests have been demonstrated. That word is important. Demonstrated. Policy 8 requires evidence that the proposal opens a new tourism market or extends the tourism season. The business plan says these outcomes will be achieved. It does not demonstrate how they will be achieved. Residents submitted detailed evidence challenging the plan and the need for additional accommodation, including Visit Scotland data showing average annual occupancy of just 45% in the area, as well as independent tourism research, which indicates oversupply in the area. That raises a very obvious question. Would these lodges generate new tourists or simply divert business from existing local providers? The report assumes new lodges equals new visitors, yet there is no data to support that, and evidence to the contrary has actually been ignored. Much of the economic case put forward is totally unsubstantiated. Perthshire may wish to attract more visitors. That does not demonstrate a need for more visitor accommodation. Why here? Policy 9 requires a specific need for this protected location. What is it? The report explains why people may visit the area. It does not explain why development must take place on this protected site. The proposal explains why the applicant would prefer to build here. It never demonstrates why they need to build here. So, Chair and members, the report concludes that the proposal satisfies the statutory duty and the policies that protect the conservation area, that it satisfies the requirements of policies 8 and 9, and that permanent development on this protected site is somehow justified. We do not believe the evidence before you demonstrates those conclusions. These are fundamental matters of planning principle. They cannot be resolved through conditions because the issue arises from the location itself. Once this protected land is developed, it is gone forever. Planning policies exist to protect places like Strathtay, and this committee has a choice. You can apply those policies and protections or not. We ask you to apply them and to refuse this application outright. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Houston. I'm aware that you're willing to take questions. Members, can you populate the chat function if you wish to ask Ms. Houston questions? Councillor Harvey.
Apologies, Vice Convener, I couldn't find the place I was wanting to answer the question. Just to reiterate a point you made, and thank you very much for your presentation, and thank you for spending the time to come down here. You mentioned about the economic case for this development, that it's not justified. Can you just expand on that a little bit more? Thank you.
Press again. Let me. In the business case, the applicant puts forward, it assumes occupancy rates of 45% over the first 5 years. Elsewhere in his proposal, he uses contradictory figures when he is when they are calculating their economic benefit case. They use a 68% occupancy figure. So the business plan states 45%. The later figures used to justify economic benefit to the area uses a 68% figure. There is no a source for that 68%. It doesn't align with their own business case. It doesn't align with average occupancy of self-catering accommodation in the area. So it's a big stretch, and it helps make a stronger economic case, which is not a very strong case. But that is one example that I can give you. I can give you further if you wish them. There are a lot of them.
No, I just want to, and just to clarify, it's about the economic justification of the economic case as per points 7 and 8. Okay, no, that's fine. That's what I wanted. Thank you.
Councillor Allen.
Thank you, Vice Convener, and thanks, Ms Houston, for your deputation. A number of times you made comment about the land being protected. Can you just tell me about that, please?
Yes, the land itself sits within a conservation area, which is part of the Grantley and Strathtay Conservation Area. So we have our own area appraisal, which I'm very familiar with, obviously. And within this appraisal, it calls out very specifically that the open landscapes alongside the river are part of what creates the richness and the character of the area. So they contribute to the area. So they are characteristics that are specifically identified within our appraisal to be protected. And as we know, your policies require that they are either enhanced or maintained. And if you build on that very open land, and I reassert, this is the last piece of open land that sits alongside the river that is within this conservation area. So if we build on that land, that open land that is called out in this, we are destroying the land, and we cannot be said to be preserving or maintaining or enhancing. So it's a fundamental point here that we cannot be aligned with policy if we're about to destroy one of the very characteristics that are raised within this document.
Bailey McLaren.
Thank you. Thank you for your deputation. Very informative. My question is, it's this particular site that is causing you concern, not the actual detail of lodges within this, the wider area. It's this particular site, is it?
Right, there we go. I personally and other objectors have concerns over the overall business case, because with an average occupancy within the area, and we have validated data we're talking about here from both Visit Scotland, from Airbnb, and from other credible sources. If the occupancy in the area, and we can drill down into the specifics of Strathtay, Aberfeldy, Pitlochry, the wider area, if the average occupancy is only 45%, for me that questions the need for more lodges. The applicant has omitted in their application, they make reference to other lodges quite some way away, but they omit the almost 32 new lodges that have just been built in Aberfeldy, and they omit from their business case the 8 lodges that sit up the road at Logie Rate. So we question the business case and therefore the need for lodges in the area, because if occupancy is only currently 45%, what impact is that going to have on existing providers of self-catering accommodation? But fundamentally, if the business case could be proven, there are other suitable sites, we believe, on Pit Castle land that is out with the conservation area, and we believe they have not been adequately considered.
Councillor Braun.
Thanks a lot, Vice Convener. So I've been trying to think of how to word this question without sounding flippant, and I don't. But forgive me if it does come across that way. But I understand your comments about conservation versus economic benefit. I understand the point you're talking about, whether it's justified, but just taking it back down to the basics, the 8 lodges on the edge of the river. I mean, how are they going to? I'm trying to get to my mind. How is it going to affect anybody? Because they're not houses. They don't be permanently occupied. They're just 8 lodges on the water's edge. You said the land would be destroyed. It isn't. The view has changed, but the land is still there. I'm trying to encapsulate the objection to the lodges as they are. Forget the other points of economic benefit and the idea that whether or not it's justified for tourism is all going back to the actual basis of these lodges on that particular site. Trying if you can expand what the real problem is there. As bear in mind that houses, they're just presumably only occupied part of the year.
Well, I think it comes back to the fact that we're in a conservation area appraisal. The conservation area appraisals identifies characteristics that should be protected within the village. So I've referenced that the open riverside space is one of those characteristics. So if the open space is built on, the open space is gone. I'm not saying the land is destroyed. I probably didn't articulate it particularly well. The open space that is identified is gone. So that is one issue. The lodge designs themselves, and your own conservation officer did an initial report in response to the initial plans, and she raised serious concerns. We can all look at the new plans, and I test you to look at them carefully alongside the old plans and see if you can really spot the difference. So I don't believe that anything has changed with regard to the density and placement of these. They sit as close to each other now as they did in the original plans that your conservation officer pulled out. The materials that have been used do not fit in any way with the recognised materials in this document. The village, which only has about 50 houses in it, is largely stone-built Victorian houses on fairly large plots, not all big houses, some small houses, well spaced out along the road. So the materials, and these are prefabricated lodges we're talking here, despite the applicant saying in their business case they were going to build them themselves and that would create jobs, that is not the case. These are prefabricated holiday lodges being shipped up from England, no less, on the back of a lorry. So that's not creating jobs here. But the materials, there are no buildings in the village, no domestic buildings built of prefabricated wood. So none of it fits with what is in this document. So that is another objection. There is reference to screening of the area. And yes, there are gorgeous trees around this site, but the riverside aspect of this, the south side, is entirely open. So if you walk along the other side of the bank, which is the Rob Roy Walkway, the village of Grantley and other areas, the site is entirely visible. So to say it's well hidden or it needs screened, the very fact that there is a suggestion it needs screened suggests it is not appropriate to the area. But it is highly visible, but that is again evidence that none of you have seen in the report.
Councillor Forbes.
Thanks very much for coming along. You certainly know this stuff inside out. You've answered every question well and elegantly, so thank you for that. Can we go back to the economics of this? So I was scanning the other night through some of the objections and indeed the small number of supports, and 2 local businesses are both in support of it, both citing that they would welcome the opportunity for further accommodation nearby to enhance their tourism businesses. And that on the face of it would seem to fly or to be contrary to what you'd said about availability of accommodation locally. I just wondered what your thoughts were on that.
My thoughts are that the two businesses that have put forward support letters are inns. So they have they're fundamentally small hotels with a small number of rooms. So yes, I don't dispute that on occasion, some of those inns on a busy summer weekend will not have availability. That does not mean they don't have availability throughout the year. And I think it's really worth pointing out from a market perspective, and this is what we're talking about, is the kind of people who will go and stay in the two inns that are referenced, the Inn on the Tay and the Ballintaggart Hotel. They are hotels, so it's largely couples who will be going to them for weekends away, short breaks away. The lodges are appealing to, in theory, appealing to a different market because by their very nature, they have 2 or 3 bedrooms in them. It is a different audience that we're talking about. So I don't think the building of the lodges addresses concerns that 2 destination inns in the area who occasionally have to turn away business, that doesn't suggest that there's a demand. Of course, they're inns, and so they have a restaurant and serve food. They will benefit. But the actual expenditure figures that are proposed in this are actually modest. And we also have to not forget, these are self-catering accommodations. So largely speaking, people come to self-cater. It does not suggest they're going to be eating out in the local restaurants or pubs every night of their visit. So it has to be taken very carefully when you're looking at that information, because one does not automatically lead to a specific answer or an argument there.
Councillor Allen.
Thank you. When I spoke to you earlier, I asked about the protection of the land and why it was protected, and you made reference to your own document there. It's an appraisal document. Is that an official document? Who does ownership lie with?
This is part of your LDP2 policies. This is the official. This is not my document. This document is your document. So it's very official. And that is what your policies and indeed NPF4 policies are there to support. It says with reference to this very appraisal document. So my suggestion is that the policy is not being met and this document isn't being adhered to.
Ms. Houston, there's no further questions. You're free to go. Now call on Mr. Cullen, objector to the application. Again, thank you for your patience, Mr. Cullen. You'll be aware of this procedure. You've got 5 minutes, so whenever you're ready to start, I'll start the clock.
Good afternoon, committee. Thanks very much for hearing representations. I'm going to cover road safety and flood risk management. The transport planning report to planners in front of you does not accurately assess the road safety risks associated with the development's intended access arrangement. I've worked in road safety and flood risk management and development control for 30 years. Common sense will tell you that approving the use of what will remain a very poor access for this purpose will substantially increase the accident risk, posing a danger to pedestrians and other vulnerable road users. Council officers have visited the site, as you've seen, and recommended width and some passing place improvements, but they do not fully represent the safety problems with the track's junction with the public road. Where the track meets the road, it's single width. This single width extends for 150 metres or so westwards. It cannot be widened, so 2 vehicles cannot pass each other here. This increases the likelihood of vehicles reversing onto the public road, which of course is most unsafe. The report recommends the track be slightly widened and to afford some passing places further west, but this is along a section of the track under the applicant's direct control. From the public road westwards for this 150 metres, the track is mostly single width,
with no passing places able to be constructed within land that the applicant controls, and no other safety improvements can be installed here. Visibility at the tracks junction with the public road. From 1.4 metres behind the kerb, visibility northwards is virtually nil and cannot be improved. Because the road climbs steeply in that direction, vehicles coming down that slope naturally will be at increased speeds. So combining poor visibility with faster than preferred approach speeds creates an inherently unsafe situation that will only worsen in the long term with increased development traffic from this junction. Visibility to the south is better than that, but this relies on an adjacent private parking space being empty, and that cannot be guaranteed. Because this is a holiday development, new drivers and pedestrians, cyclists will arrive every week and will be unfamiliar with how dangerous and restricted this junction is. Operational risks. The limitations of this tracks junction with the road cannot be resolved. HGV servicing the site will need to reverse either on the track or onto the public road, which is completely unacceptable and shouldn't be accepted. Additionally, the track meets the public road at a Y junction, which is seen from the photographs. Drivers emerging from the tracks junction will have to scan for traffic and other road users, cyclists, etc., pedestrians, kids on bikes, coming from 3 different directions. This introduces a complex, unsafe conflict point that is entirely avoidable. The risk of accidents here will immediately increase as this 8-lodge site will generate up to 64 vehicle movements a day compared to the track's current very light use. And there's also a danger of a precedent being set here, which I'm very concerned about. So not all of these critical details, dimensions or operational realities are mentioned in the reports you have in front of you. However, they are pertinent to a proper responsible consideration of this application. For the safety of the public and all road users in this area, I would urge the committee to refuse permission for this application. On flood risk management, I'm also speaking to highlight the unmitigated flood risks associated with this application. While SEPA's flood national mapping available does not currently show this risk to be this site to be at risk. A site-specific flood risk assessment was prepared by the applicants in 2012, and it does show the site to be at risk of flooding, river flooding, under prescribed flood conditions. An assessment of this nature, even one carried out 14 years ago, is more accurate than the current national mapping. There are key risk factors that the current desktop assessment that officers have carried out does not consider. Embankment failure. There's an informal embankment between the site and the River Tay, which is in very poor condition. Under flood conditions, this informal bank could easily fail, leading to immediate inundation of the site. The national mapping does not include this as a scenario. Upstream hydro scheme blockage. There is a risk of the upstream hydro scheme intake facility from the River Tay becoming blocked by washed-in river debris. Debris removal requires regular inspection and maintenance, which cannot be guaranteed ever. If a blockage occurs during flood conditions, out-of-channel flows will be directed towards the site. The development is intended for holiday visitors. These individuals will be unfamiliar with the local terrain, the behaviour of the river, or the specific flood risks, placing them at immediate danger during an incident. The flood team considers the site will be protected because it is elevated above predicted flood levels. However, this entirely misses a core principle of flood safety, the need to prevent developments from becoming completely cut off. During flood events, the access route to the site will be flooded. The site will be isolated, trapping visitors and putting emergency services at risk. It's a fundamental core principle of flooding policy. National planning policy is explicit in this matter. Planning authorities must not grant consent to developments that will cut off sites during flood conditions, as to do so places lives at risk. Because the proposal introduces an avoidable risk to life and that directly contradicts national policy, I urge. Okay, sorry, that was me doing it. I would recommend against it.
Thank you, Mr. Cullen. I know that you're willing to take questions, so members, if you've got questions for Mr. Cullen, please populate the chat function. Councillor Forbes.
Thanks, Vice Convener. I hope you don't mind me playing devil's advocate here. So you've obviously got real issues with road safety and flood issues. I think it's reasonable to assume that the council's road safety officers and the flooding team have looked at this and don't have any issue. Would you say that they're wrong?
Certainly not wish to contradict fellow professionals, as I said, but I do think from a road safety perspective, there's not been a thorough enough review of the risks. The clear, unambiguous risk is where the track meets the public road. Visibility to the north is nil. Can't see in that direction. The road comes down from that direction. And it's vulnerable users I'm concerned about. And we're going to increase the number of vehicles coming in and out of this single width access. So it can never be widened to two width. So you'll always have single width. So there's an immediate, and it's an unambiguous increased risk, which I'm concerned about. And I think there is a danger of a precedent being set. So we might have 8 lodges just now, and there's no planning condition can be attached to say you'll never have any more than 8. So there could very shortly be 28, 48, 68. Then you've set the precedent. So the accident potential increases. In the other direction, visibility, and this is despite the 20-mile-an-hour limits and the 10-mile-an-hour limit across the bridge. There's a parking space there. It's regularly frequented by people parking their car there. The private individual parks their car there. Visibility is nil in both directions then as a consequence. So it's a risk, and I'm surprised that the report to colleagues to your planners does not at all make any reference to the poor visibility at the accesses junction with the public road.
Councillor Allen.
Thank you, Vice Convener. Thanks for your deputation. Just with regards to the flood risk, just want you to just tell me, over the last couple of years, we've had some fairly horrendous weather events in this area. What has happened at that particular site over those times?
So I'm not aware that there was been any river flooding has affected the site. I couldn't tell you what the size of the event that happened several years ago. It's the combination of the river intake. There's an informal embankment between the site and the river, and that is not made of anything. It's not got a clay core. It's not been properly constructed. It's infested with animals, and there are trees growing out of it. So under these extreme conditions, it could easily fail in a winter, and that's much more dangerous than gradual flooding coming to affect the site where you can do something about it. The hydro scheme just to the upstream side of the site, the intake there regularly requires to be maintained and kept clear. So in these extreme conditions, this flow will, extreme conditions will head towards the site. I have genuine concern. And the flooding officer makes reference to a certain level that where the river would get to, and the developments to be above that. But if that does happen, it means the whole development site is cut off, and planning policy specifically prohibits development where that is the case, because emergency services can't place themselves at risk trying to rescue people. The other thing is that people living there will have no idea that these risks exist. There are very small risks, but planning policy demands that in these situations that you consider these risks in these extreme situations, I would suggest.
Bailey McLaren.
Thank you. I'm going back to the road safety aspect. I do know that road well. That junction, that area, it is constrained. The bridge, different road users, popular cyclist route, walking route. As an observation, do you see that there's any mitigation measures that could be introduced here to this application to deal with these concerns that you've raised with the visibility north and south of that junction?
I'm a road safety professional. I work in another council. I do this job quite a lot. I want to be. So I honestly can't think of anything where visibility is zero. You can't even ask the applicant to go and buy the land to make the visibility better, because that's not a competent planning condition. You can't make them apply, buy land to do something else. So it'll always be zero and it'll always be single width. And you'll always have, with not the 1 or 2 vehicle movements that you maybe get in a day, but up to 64 vehicles, back and forth all day, every day. Cyclists, people on holidays, guaranteed to be bikes, guaranteed to be kids on bikes, unaware of what's going on. It's not a terribly busy junction. I'm not trying to over-egg the pudding, but vehicles use it. Vehicles come down the hill quicker than they should do. The accident potential is real. I mean, my radar is going off here, and obviously I would say that because I'm part of the objectors, but my professional radar is going off here. And normally I would say, well, how can we mitigate this? I can't think of any way to mitigate that. You can't put mirrors up, they're illegal. The visibility is always going to be poor, I'm afraid. I can't think of anything really that could be done.
Councillor Harvey.
Excuse me, thank you, Vice Convener. I didn't know mirrors were illegal. That's a new one to me. I just want to get back to the question. I know you've answered it before, but I just want to get into a bit of depth about, obviously, as a professional in this type of field, taking your objector hat off and putting your hat on as a professional, when you were presented with this at your council. What kind of would you want done? Is it specific risk assessments of these specific issues you're talking about? How would you normally address that professionally? Thanks.
So are you talking about road safety or flood risk at the moment?
Sorry, road safety in particular.
I think because the risks are so acute and so obvious, and I said at the start, I said you don't need to be a road safety professional to see. Common sense would tell you, if you were a driver coming out there going, oh, this is a bit ropey, because you can't see to the north. So you would be creeping out. So if you were there regularly, if you lived there, people know that they've got to drive cautiously and careful. These are going to be holidaymakers and a new cohort every week. So you could put signs up, you could say, please be careful, all the rest of it. These are not they're not guaranteed to always be there. You're teaching a new cohort of holidaymakers every week about how unsafe this access is, and that's just not a sustainable arrangement, in my opinion. You can't have that. You could have a variety of different, things. Please be careful, the road. It's just unsafe, in my opinion, and it's not appropriate that a development of this nature, which has the potential to increase in size, there's just no way that you can manage that risk, in my opinion. And it's, I don't want to over-egg the pudding because I'm a professional. I just don't think it could be done to an extent that would satisfy me. My professional, my radar would be switched off and say, no, I'm fine. Because you could put signs up, you could put literature in the holiday stuff saying, please be careful of access. There are other sites, as Helen has mentioned, where the applicant could have a similar development that's adequately located and there's not a road safety risk at all associated with it. Compared to this, it's obvious and front and centre, I'm afraid, in my opinion.
Councillor Forbes.
Can I take you back to something I think you specifically said, and you referenced passing places that were in land that's not controlled by the applicant. Can you go back over that and give me a little bit more detail on what you mean by that?
So I'm saying 150 metres, but I haven't measured that sort of thing. But from where the track meets the public road, heading westwards, it's single width for a fair length, and there's no way to make a passing place there. And then it kind of widens out where the hydro scheme outtake is, and there's an area there. That area which widens out, that area is not owned by the applicant, is our understanding. So the use of that, or relying on the use of that. So if you just say, well, there's a passing place there, so vehicles can pass there. That landowner could easily just say, no, I'm going to fence that off. You would be relying on land that somebody else owns if that was the passing place. So there's no ability to provide passing places that the applicant can rely on for all time, as far as I'm aware. Beyond that is where the site is, and they have control of that, obviously, and they're proposing to widen the very narrow single width track there and provide passing places. Fine along there, but when you come towards the public road, the ability to control, and introduce passing places and make things safer doesn't exist, as far as I'm concerned.
Convener Massey.
Thank you. We talked a lot about road safety. What is the speed limit on the road that you're talking about on the bridge?
The speed limit on the public roads in the vicinity of where the access track meets the road is 20 miles an hour. The speed limit, and I do think there isn't such a thing as a 10-mile-an-hour speed limit on public roads. That's just appropriate on the bridge. So it'll be 20 mile an hour as far as I'm aware.
Bailey McLaren.
Thank you. My question now, water, river, bizarre, but stay with me. Is there evidence of beaver activity along the embankments, which in itself can compromise embankment stability when water levels rise? That's my question.
There is evidence of beaver activity there. Whether that activity would be sufficient to make the embankment unstable, honestly, I'm not a naturalist, but you can see that that it's populated by self-seeded trees, so the roots will be going down. It's just a pile of earth, and that could easily fail under these extreme conditions. And we have had extreme conditions in the past, as you obviously well know, and it's not failed. But there's no guarantee that's going to be, because nobody's put a certificate to say this embankment's made of clay and it's solid and it's inspected, it's in good condition. There's no inspection carried out there, so that's a risk. That's a flooding mechanism, potential flooding mechanism, and the national mapping that's undertaken, which your officers would have looked at, won't take cognizance of that at all, and won't take cognizance of any requirement for maintenance at the hydro bay either. So I think it just shows whether, and it shows that the site's not at risk. But I believe, from my professional judgment, that there are risks that are not considered.
Mr. Cullen, there's no further questions. You're free to go. Can I call on Mr. Salisbury, agent to the application? Good afternoon, Mr. Salisbury. I'm sure you're aware of the procedure. Whenever you're ready to start, I'll start the clock.
Convener, councillors, Graham Salisbury. I'm the agent for this application. Pitcastle Estate is a Scottish-owned estate, and the estate is looking at ways to future-proof itself against ever-changing financial challenges, including inheritance tax changes, etc., which we're all familiar with. Don't intend to drag members through all the relevant planning policy. This has already been well covered in your professional officer's detail report, reaching the balanced conclusion that this scheme should be supported. Councillors, all development has an impact on landscape. We all know that. You're all aware of that. The important point is to carefully balance any impact against the benefit. Nationally recognised studies have shown that the average spend from this type of unit is £57 per day. And if we use 68% occupancy level, we're expecting to hit much higher than this. That will result in £113,000 being spent annually in the wider economy. And this is not revenue taken by Pitcastle Estate, this is the wider economy. This same study shows that for every 55,000 spent annually in the local economy, or the wider economy, will result in a full-time job in the wider local economy. For that's every 55k spent, there'll be one full-time job in the wider economy. Again, that doesn't include the staff required by Pitcastle to manage and service the unit. Local village restaurants and hotels are currently turning away business and point out the loss of 22 letting rooms in the village B&Bs in recent years. This is a result of these becoming residential homes or second homes. Councillors, generally, and I use that word carefully, generally, the vast majority of the village's younger working community and the businesses recognise the benefit and support this application. Objectors have raised issues over access and flooding, but haven't produced any detailed evidence backed up by professionals that we've seen. However, the council's professional consultees raise no objections. And I'm just going to pick up on the flooding issue now, which has been mentioned. I know that SEPA have been pressed twice on this application, and they've come back to say that the nearest monitoring station to the application site, the highest reading they ever recorded, our site sits 7 meters above that. So anyone who knows anything about topography will realise it's highly, highly unlikely that this site would ever struggle in flooding. Convener councillors, we respectfully ask that you consider fully the benefits of this scheme, which is supported by the council's leisure and tourism policy, and the significant benefits not only to the Scottish-owned local estate, but to the wider local economy. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Salisbury. And I know that you're willing to take questions, which we have in already. So we'll start with Bailey McLaren.
Yeah, thank you. Your deputation has focused on economics, but the previous deputations have raised local concerns and what seems to be viable concerns regarding road safety. And in both of these deputations that we heard from, they had questions the choice of this site. So could I ask if the estate had looked at other sites and why those were maybe not considered that would have reduced the local concern about road safety?
Thank you. I'll try and deal with them in order. So we'll start with location. This location has been chosen because of its sustainability. We can walk to the corner shop, we can walk to the 2 hotels and restaurants, we can walk to the 2 bus stops that exist right on the doorstep. If we place holiday units across the road and higher up the hill, they're likely to be more visible than this application site, which I believe is very, very well screened. And I think you can see that from the aerial site plan. So that deals with that one, hopefully. Regarding vehicular access, we have in the past, the estate in the past has had a 40-ton crane come in on that access to service the hydro. And there are pictures and receipts which we've sent to officers to show that that's actually taken place. So while the access is limited because of the reduced speed levels, which are low in that area, I can't see any reason why this access isn't suitable. And again, that's obviously backed up by your professional officers. And there was a third point, financial.
No, thanks. The questions were related to alternative sites within the ownership of the estate and the local concerns regarding the road safety of that junction. So those were the 2 questions. Thank you.
Councillor Forbes.
One of the objectors, I think it was the first objector, raised the issue about the 2 different numbers that have been used for economic benefit, the occupancy rate. I can't remember, was it 45 and 65, and you've chosen the higher one. Can you maybe explain the background to that and if it was a genuine error or if there's some other reason for that?
Not sure where the 45% comes from. As far as I'm concerned, it's 68%. The Strath Tay lodges down the road towards Aberfeldy are quite a new development. I have a personal friend who bought one of those 2 years ago, and his occupancy level is 80% at the moment. And he's going through Sykes cottages, and members would be able to look that up and check that out afterwards if they wish to do so. The estate has another holiday unit, which they've just started letting over the last 12 months. And that is doing very well at the moment with limited marketing and advertising. So any business operator or any estate that's thinking of investing in excess of £800,000 on a development isn't going to do it without doing the homework. And I can assure you, Pitcastle Estate believe this development will work and it will assist them going forward.
Councillor Harvey.
Thanks, Vice Convener. I've got a question about location. I'll come back to that. I have more question. Did I catch you right saying that there's a, I don't know where the figure comes from. You said the others didn't have evidence. I didn't hear any evidence, but £57 per day. And based on your calculation, that's going to create 2 whole new jobs locally. Was that your calculation?
We used initially the Scottish Caravan and Camping Forum report, November 2014. There are no more recent documents that we could find in Scotland. We could have used documentation from south of the Wall, which I think would have actually increased our projections, but we thought we'd better keep it Scottish. And that's basically the study concluded that £57 per day spent in the wider economy was what they concluded. And that generated, for every 55,000 spent in the local economy, that would generate 1 full-time job in the wider community. So it's based on a Scottish study, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, I'm aware of that. There is more recent figures if you do a bit more research, but that's from 2014. Is that still relevant now? And you're seriously saying building 5 new lodges in Strathtable can create 1 new job in the local area? I know it's not a real, it's the equivalent of, but is that your position? Yeah.
We should create at least 2 new jobs in the wider economy, and we're definitely going to increase employment on the estate, servicing, managing, and looking after the units.
Councillor Braun.
Thanks for asking, Brina. You may have answered this indirectly anyway, but is it the plan that lodges be open and available all year round, or are they going to be seasonal? If they're all year round, presume you expect a drop in occupancy during the winter months, is it?
They will be available all year round. And obviously, anyone familiar with the holiday trade and the holiday business, we work on about 60 leisure parks across the UK. And there are peaks and troughs around, obviously, school holidays, seasonal holidays, Easter, Whitsuntide, Christmas, etc. So that does fluctuate. But again, nationally recognised companies, letting companies like Sykes Cottages, who are very good, you can go on there and you can see the trend. And what they do, they price weekly according to the peaks, so that you maximise, try and maximise your return.
Councillor Allen.
Thanks, Vice Convener. Mr Salisbury, hiya. Thank you for your deputation. At paragraph 72 in our report with regards to drainage and flooding, it says, a number of concerns have been raised with regards to flooding. The flood team have reviewed the documents referred to in objections and sought further information from the applicant. Naturally, I'll ask the officers the same question, but can you tell me, have you addressed those?
As far as I'm aware, Councillor, yes, we have. I know that the flood team were consulted on 2 separate occasions due to local concerns. And I know that on both occasions, no objection was raised. Now, I can only, this application has been running for quite a while. I can only assume that these were drainage issues internal drainage issues on wastewater, surface water, etc. And I can assure you they will have been dealt with.
Councillor Cuthbert.
Thank you, Vice Convener. You took me by surprise there. I thought it was before me. Thank you for your presentation. I'm interested in knowing about the conservation area. In terms of National Planning Framework, MPF4, Policy 7D, and our own Local Development Plan Policy 28A, they both say that development in conservation areas will only be supported by the character and appearance of the conservation area and its setting is preserved or enhanced. So how do you see these lodges enhancing or preserving the conservation area?
Conservation area wraps around a considerable area in Strathtay and Grantley. The built form of Strathtay is quite separate from this site. So it's not exactly viewed in the same context. It's separate and it's very, very well screened. And what you have to do is balance, as I said in my opening statement, you've got to balance the impact against the benefits. And in this instance, we strongly believe benefits outweigh the detrimental impact. And that's been supported by your conservation officer in raising no objections to this report.
So effectively, you're saying it doesn't preserve or enhance the area, but it's outweighed by the economic benefits.
I'm saying it preserves.
Councillor Forbes.
I got the sense from one of the objectors, or perhaps both, that one of their concerns is that this number of lodges relatively small is a kind of get your toe in and then come back for more and more and more. Are you able to give us any assurance that that's not the case?
Councillor, I'm just instructed on these 8 units currently, nothing more.
Councillor Harvey.
Thanks, Vice Convener. The question is related, it comes back to one of your early statements about the location of this development. I'm not sure, I know this area fairly well, and this area is quite visible if you're in the path on the other side of the road or even on the main roads. I struggle to understand why you've picked this area, apart from the fact it's right on the last bit of undeveloped river. Was there no other thought given to other locations for these lodges? Because this is a kind of odd location as far as I'm concerned. I'm just wondering what other serious consideration was given for location other than this. Thanks.
Just to answer that question, we looked at the whole estate when considering this leisure proposal. There are 2 restricting factors, or 2 factors that sort of ended up with us choosing this site. One is that only the lower half of the estate is served by water, electricity, etc., within easy reach. The second being the site is very, very sustainable in planning terms, and I'm hoping your officers can back me up on this. The fact that it's within walking distance of the corner shop, the 2 hotels and restaurants, the bus stops, etc., make it the ideal location in planning terms for that reason. If you start putting units up the hill on the opposite side of the Strathtay Road, them units can be more visible than the site we've actually chosen for obvious reasons.
I mean, I suppose it depends on where you're talking about up the hill, but everything seems to be within fairly easy walking distance off the shop. It's, and something tells me that the people visiting these lodges will not always be visiting the shop or the pub. But anyway, thanks for your answer.
Councillor, you need to be asking questions rather than making statements.
Bailey McLaren.
Thank you. I think Councillor Harvey maybe asked part of the question I was asking. Previous deputations, I'm going back to maybe earlier, the previous deputations spoke strongly about the road junction. So in choosing this site, did you consider that you could there could be another access made to this site that would avoid that road junction?
Initially, the initial scheme that was shown on the screen, we'd looked at an alternative access coming off the Strathtay Road. Yeah. After discussions with the Community Council and hearing some of the objections, we decided to delete that and come down to the one access. There's no professional evidence been supplied by anyone to say that that access is unsuitable. And as I repeat myself, your professional officers raised no objection.
Just a follow up then, did you or the applicant do any traffic modelling themselves? I know you've spoken about walking, but you know, the weather at times can be, it's not like today, it can be raining, cold, frosty, whatever it be. So have you, as part of the application, your own data, carried out some traffic modelling?
There's no traffic modelling been done, purely because of the small nature of the proposal, 8 units. And we're exiting onto a road 20 miles an hour. So there's been no request. If we'd have been asked or requested to do some modelling, I'm sure we could have provided it, but as far as I'm concerned, Councillor, there's been no need because of the scale of the operation. It's quite small.
Mr. Salisbury, there's no further questions. You're free to go. Convener, there's no further deputations on this application, so I'll hand back to yourself.
Thank you. Can I ask members if they've got any questions for officers? So, Alan, I'll let you ask your first question. I'll let you ask your first question then.
Thank you, convener. I asked the first deputy about the land being protected, and there was reference to their appraisal document. Can you tell me, is the land protected, and what's the legitimacy of that document? Thank you.
The land's not protected, it's in a conservation area. And the document is the appraisal of that conservation area undertaken a number of years ago.
Councillor Braun.
Thanks, Convener. I was looking through some of the documents after one of the objectors spoke. This was the response for the conservation officer. And she obviously raised some concerns about the layout of the lodges, as we know. And she does say fine to reassess it and refer back to me, but I can't see any reference back to her again. And I just wondered, did we do that? Or because obviously the lodge layout was changed slightly, but do we refer that back?
As you might be aware, they are part of the development management team under my management, and people talk every day. So we do try and avoid unnecessary back and forth. And in this case, discussions were held internally as to the changes made, but it wasn't felt necessary that we issue a formal consultation and get a formal response back. But you know, we're comfortable with the position as per the report.
So everybody's happy with the changes, but verbally?
Yes.
Thank you. Councillor Forbes.
Thank you, convener. I last night read all of the objections, in fact, all of the documents, and we've listened to more objections again today. And if you only took them in their entirety, you'd kind of wonder why we're recommending this for approval. So I just wondered if I could give the opportunity to the officers, if there's anything specific that's been said today by anybody who that they disagree with, or they'd like to offer any clarity to us on, would they like to do so?
I think the position is set out quite clearly in the report. Obviously, different people have different opinions on what checks and balances there should be, but the position set out clearly in the report. If you've got any specific questions, happy to answer them. We also have other officers present that can provide detail in relation to roads matters, for example.
Thanks for that opportunity, because I do have a couple. I'll maybe keep some for later, but one of the issues I think has come forward is the suggestion that 8 may be the starting point. There may be more, and I know, Christian, you'll tell me that 8 is what we're looking at the moment. Can we condition any approval to make sure that it is only 8, or is that not within our gift?
8 is what we are looking at the moment. Only 8 are proposed, so to condition that it shan't be different to 8 isn't necessary because it's only 8. If there were further proposals to come forward in future, we would look at them on their merits. But I think as the applicant's agent has said, they're not aware of any further proposals. They are looking at 8. So the description sets out 8. There's no need for any condition to require that there's no more than 8.
Sorry, just to come in to add to that, the description of the proposal that you have is erection of 8 holiday accommodation units. That would go on the planning permission. If they wanted to, you don't need to condition it. It is 8. If there is an application for more later on, that would be an application that would have to be assessed. So there's no need to condition when it's already in the dam. I won't explain the differences in descriptions and conditions, but the planning permission would be for 8 holiday accommodation units. If there's a desire for anything more, it would need another application.
Thank you. Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, convener. Question I had just following on from Councillor Allen's question just regarding the conservation area. I understand that you are allowed to develop within conservation areas under certain conditions. Can I just summarise the acceptance of yourselves that this can be built in the conservation areas due to the economic benefits that this development will bring? Thanks.
Well, yes, the development plan requires to be looked at in the round and a decision taken on balance relative to things that are relevant to take into account. In relation to the impact on the conservation area, the relevant legislation requires that special regard is given to preserving and enhancing conservation areas, and I feel that we've taken special regard in relation to that matter. However, there will be change in relation to what is within the conservation area, because where there is no lodges, there will be 8 lodges, but that impact is considered to be acceptable when balanced against all relevant matters.
Okay, thanks.
Councillor Cuthbert.
Thank you, convener. My question relates to policy 9. I'm just wondering how much emphasis we should put on this. In essence, policy 9 is caravan sites, chalets and timeshare developments, and it makes reference to the fact that development proposals will only be approved where they will not result in adverse effects either individually or in combination on the integrity of the River Tay special area conservation, which of course lies right adjacent to this site. So what weight should we put on that?
Well, we don't feel that there would be an adverse impact on the special area of conservation, but that is a relevant factor to weigh up in the consideration. So if you were saying that there was an adverse effect, then I think it's been advised in relation to other items, and regularly at this committee you would need to demonstrate what the evidence for that position was.
Thank you. And Councillor James, your first question.
Yeah, thanks, convener. There was quite a hoo-ha made about the road access. Excuse me, and I just wondered if Lachlan was online, whether he would be able to comment for us, please.
Lachlan.
Yep, sorry, I can't get my camera to come on just now. Apologies. Oh, there we go. That's my camera now. Yes, so in terms of my assessment of the vehicle access at the site, I undertook a site visit, as you're aware, and you've maybe seen in some of the photographs that have been presented today. So the width of the track there is 3.3 metres in terms of the width there as you're coming up. There is a little bit of space beyond that, which is kind of had vegetation growth on that. So it is very much a single file access into the site there. In terms of the passing places along the track and what are proposed, in terms of the red line boundary that was presented for the application, the first passing place is at 60 metres from the vehicle access itself, and that is the one that's opposite the cottage where the garage is. I know it's been advised to us that that might always be available, but my understanding is that that was within the red line boundary of the application and would be in the gift of the applicant to kind of have discussions with the landowner on that point. Beyond that, the next one's at 40 metres beyond, so that's 60 metres in. The next one would be 100 metres in, so that's plus 40 from the existing, the other passing place that's there. That was to be provided on the north side of the track as well. And then beyond that is another passing place, 50 metres. So that's on the south side of the track where the hydro schemes is currently located. There's a big large area there. Beyond that, there's another passing place proposed at 90 metres. That would be on the north side of the track. And then beyond that again, the next one's at 35 metres. That's just before Milton up at Castle, which is a dwelling house along the track there. In terms of access into the site from the track itself, as many people have mentioned already, the speed limit is 20 miles an hour in the vicinity of that location. The bridge itself is subject to an advisory speed limit of 10 miles an hour. So, as was kind of mentioned before, there is the previous gentleman or objector had said that there was no 10-mile-an-hour speed limit. That is correct in terms of what's been presented at the site. We have a white plate with an advisory max speed of 10 miles an hour. That is an advisory speed limit for that location as you kind of go over the bridge and head towards Grantley in the southerly direction. In terms of visibility at the site, I went out and had a look at the site, as I've said. So the road from the road at the site itself, as you come over the bridge, you come in from a southeasterly direction and then it bends round to the northeast. At the War Memorial itself, as you're coming from the Strathtay shop, as you come down, you're coming to a give way. And visibility at that point in terms of looking to the northeast is restrained by the War Memorial at that point there. So traffic will be giving way and slowing down. I would have concerns with the comments that traffic is increasing in speed coming down the hill there, as we do have the give way sign at the give way at that point. There may be motorists and different driver behaviour who don't do that, but they should be looking and giving way to the traffic that is also on the road network at that location. You'll have seen in the presentation that Christian presented at the start there were pictures from that access point. I wanted to check that there was the intervisibility between the two from the road as you're coming down from the Strathtay shop into the access itself, and there is the visibility there is the intervisibility when you're at the yield line there, so you can see between the vehicles there. So in my opinion, I appreciate that other people have a differing opinion to myself. I have been out and assessed the site itself that has been presented to us.
Thank you. We'll go back to Councillor Allen.
Thank you, Convener. My points relate to the drainage and flooding with regards to the question I asked Mr. Salisbury, whether he had responded to the request for further information. And then at number 73, it suggests that there is a high risk of fluvial flooding during a 1 in 200 year event. Yet at 75, we're suggesting there's no risk and there's no further detail required. It's all slightly contradictory. Thank you.
So the situation is that the council's flood and structures team have been consulted and I suppose in short have looked in detail at the situation and have no objection. So in relation to the flood risk issue, the council's flood team have been consulted and have no objection, subject to the condition in relation to finished floor levels.
Did the applicant come back to address the flooding questions that you had for them?
Yes.
Can I ask a supplementary? Yeah. At our last committee meeting, we did a consideration on the Traveller site, and the consideration with regards to the flooding just seems to be completely contradictory. Can you comment on that, please?
Yes, that site was identified as being at significant risk of flooding no. So that this site in itself, so again, if you look at the paragraphs that are relevant, that no, 73 says the SEPA flood map indicates that the site itself is not at risk of flooding. However, the site boundary is shown to be at a high risk of fluvial flooding during, so that's at the boundary, not the site itself. It then goes on to talk in more detail about the situation. But again, I'd go back maybe to my initial response. The Council's Structures and Flooding team have looked at it and are satisfied.
Thank you. Councillor Cuthbert.
Thank you, convener. It's the same question I asked Mr. Salisbury. Can officers tell me how they think that this development will enhance the appearance and character of the conservation area?
Again, I'd probably go back to an earlier answer from another councillor that we have had special regard to the special characteristics of the conservation area, and there will be change, but that change is not significant enough to warrant refusal of the application. It will be change. It will not store an aspect. The conservation area, there will be change, but that is not to an extent that is felt to be unacceptable.
Thanks, convener. I just want to follow on a little bit from Councillor Allen's question about the flooding, and I read here obviously that the lodges will sit high, so they themselves are not at risk of flooding as such. But one of the objectors mentioned that the access track could flood, and that could be a problem for emergency vehicles getting through. So, is that something we've assessed, or are we aware of that?
Yes, and the Structures and Flooding team have looked at the proposals and are unsatisfied.
Thank you. Bailey McLaren.
Yeah, thank you. When you introduced the report, you spoke about the potential different access, second access, but that was then removed. Is that appropriate that we maybe would condition if we were minded to be approving a separate access point, or is that not pertinent?
It's no longer part of the proposals, and I think that through what I understand from what was said, that other parts of the community had issues with that secondary access, therefore it was removed. But it's not part of the consideration that we have today.
And your third question, Councillor Allen.
Thank you, convener. Yeah, just aware that I asked the question about whether the land is protected, and there's an appraisal document which apparently comes from council documentation, and therefore it should be protected, or it's a conservation area. I'm aware that in conservation areas we don't allow solar panels or triple glazing. So I'm trying to understand how we can apply and allow 8 lodges. Do those lodges have solar panels on them?
I would maybe challenge that position, that we do allow solar panels and triple glazing in conservation areas. Maybe what you're saying is they need planning permission. What we have here is an application seeking planning permission. So we need to determine whether or not this situation is acceptable, as we would consider whether or not solar panels or triple glazing that required planning permission because they were in a conservation area would be considered.
Thank you. Any further questions? No further questions. Can I ask for a motion? Motion from Councillor Cuthbert.
Thank you, convener. I've listened to all the arguments here. In principle, I think this proposal breaches policies 7D of MPF 4, 28A of LDB 2, and policy 9 of LDB 2. In essence, I can't see how that this proposed development will enhance the appearance of the conservation area, and it certainly won't be preserving it because it's removing it. And just as a sort of point of clarification, it is in the conservation area. It is in the documentation we produce, which is the conservation appraisal, and it is shown on the LDP2 map. So I am proposing to refuse on the basis that it breaches these three policies.
Bailey McLaren, you wish to second?
Yeah, I was second, but I also would have added policy 60B and 15 of LDP2.
Thank you. Can I ask if there's an amendment? I will put forward the amendment to approve the application. I think the application is sound. We've got to take all the policies as a whole, not just individual policies. The planning team have done their homework about the roads, about the flooding, everything. So I will put forward that we approve the application. Do you have a seconder? Councillor Stewart.
I concur with the report and would like to second.
Councillor Cuthbert, you want to take 5 for just to go over the... Yeah. Can I ask members if they've got any comments on the report? Comments on the report, therefore I'll hand over to Mr. Elliott for the legal
Legalities, yes. Thank you, Convener. What I'll explain in terms of the adjournment was a short adjournment to allow me to speak to the movers of the motion to get the correct terms of the motion, and I'm going to narrate that in a second. It's important not just to say what policies have been breached, but why they were breached, and that's what we're doing. Now, the motion by Councillor Cuthbert, seconded by Councillor McLaren, and I'll read out the terms of it. Refuse on the basis that the application is contrary to the planning listed, and in brackets, listed building and conservation areas, Scotland Act 1997, section 64(1). National Planning Framework 4, 2023, Policy 7D, Historic Assets and Places, and Perth and Carross Local Development Plan 2, 2019, Policy 28A, Conservation Areas, New Development, as the proposal fails to preserve and enhance Grantley and Strathley Conservation Area by introducing modern design built development in an open area important for the setting of that conservation area. And further, the modern design and layout does not reflect the pattern and styles within the conservation area. First of all, I want to check, Councillors Cuthbert and McLaren, does that reflect your motion?
It does, thank you.
Thank you, yes.
Now that's the motion to refuse. The amendment to approve in line with recommendation is by convener, seconded by vice convener. Yeah, so just to remind members, motion to refuse, amendment to grant.
Members, when I call out your name, if you can advise whether you're voting for the motion to refuse or the amendment, which is to approve the application. Councillor Allen.
Motion.
Councillor Braun.
Motion.
Councillor Cuthbert.
Motion.
Councillor Forbes.
Motion.
Councillor Harvey.
Motion.
Councillor James.
Motion.
Councillor Massey.
Amendment.
Bailey McLaren.
Motion.
Councillor Stewart.
Amendment.
and Councillor Waters.
Motion.
We have 8 votes for the motion and 2 votes for the amendment. Therefore, the motion will carry.
Thank you. Therefore, plan permission is refused. Okay, we move swiftly on, and we've got a couple of plans today. And the first one is for a residential development and associated works at land 100 metres west of Strathmore Terrace, Ailith. Do we have any comments on that? Bailey McLaren.
Yeah, thank you. I would like the applicants to consider path networks, travel routes, active travel routes through this site. It's zoned, but as well as other aspects, can we please keep our eye on the opportunities of path networks? Thank you.
Thank you. And the next one is for the erection of an office building, formation of access and parking area and associated works at land 880 metres north of Bertha Park, Fareham. Do members have any comment on that? No comment on that. That's the last. Oh, sorry. Councillor James.
Yes, sorry, convener. I couldn't get anything in the yes, I'm glad to see this coming forward, but I just wonder, it's quite a large development already, and are we able to look at local services? Are they sufficient for this building? Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. No further comments. Okay, that's the last item of business today. So thank you everyone for being here today, and thank you everyone for watching. Thank you.